Hello, this is Dr. Paul Cottrell, and we are live streaming on YouTube today, and I'll be setting up the X spaces for the simulcast. We're going to go over some of the news and my perspective on it. But before we do, please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com, and help support the work that I do by donating. You can donate through Stripe, PayPal, or Buy Me a Coffee. You can be a paid member to my Patreon channel. I do these videos for free, so it's through the patronage of purchasing the products that I have on my store and donations and sharing the links and asking your social media to follow me that helps with doing this content. So I greatly appreciate all the help that you do provide. In addition, I have great products on my store that will, if you follow the protocol, will slow down the aging process and increase your longevity. This is a great way for you to get healthy. So please pay attention and stack the supplements accordingly, and you're going to be able to notice that your body is getting into homeostasis. So please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com. Make sure you subscribe to all my channels. I have 4 channels on YouTube, Brighteon, Bitchute, and Rumble. I also have channels on X and on GETTR, so you can follow me that way too. And again, please share the links with your social media and ask your followers and the ones that you know to follow me. I greatly appreciate it. All right, with that said, let's go to a clip by NBC that was yesterday about civility measures to admissions to colleges.
Returning to college campuses after years of turmoil.
Protests have fueled hate speech.
The summit.
Let me just switch to the
President Trump's crosshairs. They want to show how smart they are, and they're getting their ass kicked.
Students are not getting along, faculty's not getting along.
And in this environment, schools are looking to adapt, meaning students may face a new challenge before even getting in.
One of the ways that colleges are trying to address this is to start screening for it a little bit in the admissions process.
Those applying to some top colleges this fall could see some new questions. Last year, Harvard added a prompt following some Ivy League competitors. Tell us about a moment when you engaged in a difficult conversation or encountered someone with an opinion or perspective that was different from your own. And now students can opt to submit a new so-called portfolio when applying to at least 6 other colleges, measuring qualities related to civility.
I think the universities, yes, they are interested in students having that practice, having built that muscle.
That's Saul Khan, who created Khan Academy, the massive tutoring nonprofit. Now he has a new pilot program called Dialogues, hosted on the peer tutoring platform schoolhouse.world, where students can disagree with each other and learn from it, logging hours they've spent in discussions over Zoom where they debate each other on hot topics, from gun control to immigration and the Israel-Palestine conflict.
It's so easy for us to get stuck on social media or sometimes see things on TV where people are yelling at each other. We're all in our own bubbles. But to see young people actually model how the rest of us should be. That's what gave us confidence to make this a broader program.
Afterwards, students receive reviews from their peers, rating them based on their virtues like how curious or even how kind they were in a session. Then a portfolio of reviews can be submitted to schools for consideration.
Now, think about this. Think about how stupid this is. All right, you're going to be having a discussion about something that will cause conflict between multiple groups. All right. Then, if you aren't, quote, civil, or maybe not agreeing in most of the crowd, how are you going to have positive feedback when they do their questionnaire? So people aren't going to be fully engaged in real disagreement, civil disagreement, but real disagreement. What's going to happen is they'll go to the mean and people are going to go, well, wait a minute, I want a good feedback score for my application. So I'm just not going to be confrontational. I'm just going to be the silent majority. or I'm just going to be agreeable. You can't have a scoring system, because by the scoring system alone is a control mechanism to not truly have vigorous debate. It's a control system.
Clear how much weight they have in admissions. We reached out to the 6 schools Khan lists as partners and were not granted interviews.
I saw that this was another application component, and I thought, this might be another way to just show who I am.
John Sargent is a high school senior from Illinois. He's hoping to attend the University of Chicago next year, one of the schools considering these portfolios.
I love discourse, I love debate. If that's a way to strengthen the application for that school, most certainly.
The idea for dialogues initially coming together because of Kahn's conversations with University of Chicago's Dean of Admissions, Jim Nondorf, who told Ed Week he wants to accept students that, quote, add to the conversation on campus, but do it in the right way. Critics argue new platforms like this are just another way for the affluent to game the system. The New York Times running a guest essay from a sophomore at Harvard titled, Elite Colleges Have Found a New Virtue for Applicants to Fake. After that published, Vanderbilt and MIT, which once signed on to accept civility portfolios, reversing that decision.
Exactly. That's the point I'm making. This is the point I'm making. You add in the civility component, and there's a feedback of the individuals in the actual debate. You're not going to say what you really believe. You're going to be curtailed in your real discussion. Is it really teaching rhetoric? Is it really teaching civility? Or is it teaching that you need to just comply? Just be civil and comply so you can get in. It's a big problem.
After careful consideration and hearing some concerns, MIT did not explain its decision to NBC News, but said it's committed to developing in our students a capacity to listen openly and disagree respectfully.
It is actually very hard to fake authenticity.
Responding to critics, Khan says submitting the optional portfolios is like disclosing volunteer hours, and that other parts of applications can be unfair.
A lot of affluent kids can hire coaches. I'm a big fan of things where it's just you and a couple of other folks, and you're forming a real human connection.
But that human connection not always an aspect of some new AI tools, also meant to improve civil discourse. One professor at Carnegie Mellon created Sway, a free AI-based chat platform that moderates students' discussions, interjecting if things get too hot. In the past, many college prep experts advise students to avoid hot-button topics, but now some changing their tune.
When you make an investment to be purposeful about your growth and to cultivate these qualities that, again, we can all agree are positive qualities.
This is social control. For the ones that just joined, thank you for joining. We're live streaming on YouTube and simulcasting on X Spaces. Right now, the topic of discussion here is how colleges are starting a pilot program where in the application for the student, there's a civility test. And Khan Academy will have a Zoom call kind of discussion with students, and there's a hot topic to discuss. And it's there's feedback from the students that were in the Zoom call that grades the different students. And then this optional part of the civility metric can be used as their common application to college. So what colleges are doing now with this pilot program is trying to screen students that are civil, all right, instead of students that are non-civil. The problem is, if you're trying to get in, if you're doing this optional piece of the application, you're already probably a very competitive person, and you also know game theory. So you're going to start thinking you can't really say anything that's button pushing in the Khan Academy because you're going to get a negative feedback score. So why would you send an application to, let's say, Harvard or MIT or University of Chicago with a low feedback score for civility? So you're going to be in a Zoom call. They're going to have a hot button topic like maybe Palestinian and Israeli conflict, or the Ukraine-Russian conflict, or ultra liberalism versus conservatism, or abortion, rights, or whatever. All right. Will the students really engage in what they believe, or will they engage in the Zoom call to get a positive feedback score? So people are just faking it. So this is a means to control the student so they can get in. All right. Now I'm against this civility metric for applications, because people that are smart are gonna fake it. All right. The ones that are dumb are gonna just say what they want, and they're being honest. At least you got to give them credit for being honest. But the thing is that whoever is in your group, when you're trying to measure people in the Zoom call where they stand, you're going to try to find the center ground so it doesn't create conflict, so you have a high feedback score. Because the students within the Zoom call are the ones that are rating you. It's like a 360 review system, which I'm totally against. I think corporations that do 360 reviews are stupid. But the thing is that the students are going to fake it because they want the positive score. So this is just another means of social control. All right. But we do have a problem, for sure. We have a problem on college campuses of this liberal, ultra liberal mentality, and it becoming violent. How many violent situations in college campuses are there with conservatives? When you have a conservative person speaking, guess what? Almost always the liberal constituency within the student body tries to boycott and prevent the lecturer from talking. How often does that happen in a conservative situation where there's a liberal person talking and it's the conservative constituency within the student body that's protesting? So where's the real problem here? The real problem is actually with the ultra liberals. So having a civility metric you're just going to fake it. So stupid.
If it's even possible to measure civility, and whether colleges trying can heal a fractured society, still very much up for debate.
Yeah, Rahim, I think that last sentence is so critical, right? Because civility seems to be in short supply these days everywhere. So how can AI or even a non-AI program measure civility?
That's a great question, Tom. I think it's all coming down to, as the experts say, a question of whether or not.
All right, so you have two ways to measure. You're going to have a measurement of a 360 review with the students that you discussed. And of course, you want positive reviews, so you don't want to cause any havoc. And so you're just going to be cordial. So it's a fake debate. But then you have an AI. Who trained the AI? How's it trained? Is it trained with a ultra-liberal perspective? Is it trained with a conservative perspective? Is it trained in a way where, as long as you don't hurt someone's feelings, you get a good score? Crazy. It's crazy. This is on top. Students that have to go to college now, a good school, all right? Let's say the top 50, all right? These students, it's as if they're applying to medical school. They have to have, it's too much stress with these students. And in most cases, these students have had like a tiger mom scheduling their life for the last 15 years. All right. And they really didn't have any time to really be a kid, any time to really enjoy their youth, because it was all about get into a good school, and all these extracurriculars and all this. And a lot of these extracurriculars are not sports related. All right, so they may get into sports early, and then they just don't have the athletic ability, so it winds down in high school. They may have some athletic ability early in elementary school, soccer, baseball, right? But then eventually, if they don't have the chops to elevate to the next level, then they'll move into something else, like violin or piano or ballet or whatever it is, right, for these kids. But the thing is it's regimental, and they have to do it every day or every other day or 3 times a week, and to have that good application, and they have to do extra time for nonprofits or whatever, to donate their time to help food pantries or whatever. But the thing is that it's very regimental, all right? So these kids, what happens is that they don't really associate with their peer group as much as, let's say, the Gen Xers. I mean, and in the summer, almost every day we play baseball or football in elementary school, all right? Or wiffle ball, right? In the winter, it was hockey. It was street hockey, right? So there was a lot of activity when we were kids, but we didn't have this regimental thing from the parents. It was just organic. And so, or people that have lived their youth in an organic way in terms of activities versus ones that are very regimental, I'll tell you what, the ones that live their life organically, they're better in a social setting because there's some soft skills that are developed during that time period. If you have a regimental thing and Susie's always going to violin practice, you really think that Susie is socially wired properly? Probably not. Probably not. So you have a declining of what's happening is you're having a declining of physical activity and physical strength in the new generation that's going into college. I don't even know what generation they are now. I mean, it's beyond millennials. It's like alpha or whatever it is. But whatever their term is. But their strength's going down, and their social connections are going down in the real world because they're all into this whole social media TikTok stuff. All right, so they get the dopamine hit. They have this ADHD kind of like instant gratification issue that's going on. And you can easily take advantage of these people. Easily. Just walk down the street of any New York street or on the MTA, and you can see that every single person on the train can be taken advantage of because they have focused their attention for hours on end on that phone. So the ones that are smart, they use the phone as a means to make money. But the masses, they're consuming. They're consuming, and it's dumbing down their brainwave. So this is happening to the kids while their brain is still developing, because the brain doesn't stop developing, wiring itself until around 22, age 22. Now, you do have neuroplasticity in your adulthood, where you have a buildup of neural connections and a recession of neural connections. But the major wiring and developing phase is from in utero to age 22. So if you have kids that are playing around on these stupid phones at age 10, all the way into their early adulthood, their brain isn't wired properly. That's a fact. So these kids aren't being prepared for the real world. And you're going to somehow use a screening test for civility? That's stupid. What you need to do is start to curtail the actual phone use with these kids and get them in the real world and allow them to have this organic aspect with their life. And then you'll actually have a population that has more musculature, has less diabetes, they're healthier when they're getting into college. Their brain isn't fried because of the phone system. And actually, you'll have thinkers instead of these individuals that are reactive. See, what's happening on college campuses is they hear something, they're reactive. They say, a certain group supporting, let's say, the Palestinians. Let's say like Gays for Palestine or something like that, which doesn't make sense because Islam isn't very copacetic with homosexuals. But the thing is that they have these knee-jerk reactions in the United States. Why is that? It's because of the dopamine hit from the phones with the social media. Because critical thinking isn't there. It's just reactive. So these students using TikTok, using Snapchat, and doing all these, looking at these social media platforms, and they're not using critical thinking, but they're just reactive because they're looking at a 30-second clip or a minute clip. And social media wants to feed this because that's how they make money. You're going to have a society within this youth that doesn't have critical thinking. Big problem. So when they're reactive, when they hear something that they don't like, they've been trained on the phone. Oh, type in something negative or just cancel them or whatever. So when they're in the real world where there's real consequences, they don't know how to act. So don't do the test. Change the behavior where the root cause is. It's the phones. And big tech knew this was going to happen.
Agreeable. And these platforms have put up a couple of things that they want people to think about. They hope that AI is going to be able to discern, and that is whether or not someone is being calm when they're having a discussion with someone. And that is a discussion, and it's not a debate where you're locked in on your ideas and that you are inflexible in terms of considering someone else. So that idea of being respectful, empathetic, and a good listener, that might determine it.
Yeah, what do they say when you go to a friend's house for dinner? Don't talk politics, don't talk religion. That's not easy to do in college. That's where you're supposed to be talking religion and politics.
For sure.
All right, Rahima, thank you very much.
We thank you for watching, and remember, stay updated on breaking news and top stories on the NBC News app or watch live on our YouTube channel.
All right, well, that's that. All right, let's listen to General Keane. This has to be a very frustrating for Trump. I think this is dealing with a flare-up in the Middle East. It might be a flare-up in Ukraine. I'm not sure yet. Maybe Ukraine up there. All right.
30 missiles into Kyiv, killing 21, including 4 children.
He was not happy about this news, but he was also not surprised. Perhaps both sides of this war are not ready to end it themselves. The president wants it to end, but the leaders of these two countries need it to end and want it to end, must want it to end as well.
This was Russia's deadliest attack on the Ukrainian capital since President Trump's meeting with Putin in Alaska earlier this month. Fox News senior strategic analyst, retired 4-star General Jack Keane, joining us now. General, good morning. Thanks for joining us. This is your reaction to this attack. This was a horrific attack, and it certainly suggests that Putin has other intentions, than ending this war.
Yeah, well, you're absolutely right, Griff. I mean, the pattern is pretty clear. It's been going on for 6 months in terms of the negotiations between the president and Putin, and also the teams below them in negotiations with each other. I mean, what came out of the Alaska summit certainly was encouraging. And the fact is that the Russians seem to be saying that we're willing to meet with Zelensky, which was a major step forward, something they've been opposed to. Zelensky's been for it, the president's been for it. And then the second major issue was, it's reasonable that Ukraine has to have some kind of security guarantees, unspecified, of course. That resulted, those two concessions or discussion points resulted in Zelensky and all the Europeans coming to the White House, which we all witnessed last week. And it was a remarkable session. And that session produced unity, commitment, and resolve, to get on with the peace process and also to put together some security guarantees for Ukraine. All of that has been going on for a week or so. Meanwhile, what Putin has done, and it seemed like he's talking peace, but he continues to make war, not only on the front lines and losing 30,000 plus soldiers a month. A few months ago, he was losing over 40,000 a month. But the reality is he escalated the war against civilians. As you noted, 21 dead, 4 children, over 50 wounded in that massive attack. Talking peace, but escalating the war against the civilians to put more pressure on Zelensky. That has got to be very frustrating for the president, because what Putin did is immediately reneged on those 2 points. One, meet with Zelensky. Now Lavrov says, well, we wanted to meet with him. We got get the agenda right, and the agenda is not right. And 2, on security guarantees, they want no Western troops in Ukraine whatsoever, assuming it's a peace agreement. Well, how can you have any security guarantees at all if you don't have some physical presence to stop and deter an attack by Russia? So they completely walk back those concessions. And that's kind of where we are, and the president is frustrated.
It's such a great point, General. We've got Social Envoy Steve Witkoff up here in New York looking to meet with Ukraine. Hey, let me shift gears just real quickly. I do want to get your reaction to the Europeans are stepping up in a big way. We've got this snapback plan to unleash some sanctions that were originally lifted on Iran. And Secretary of State Marco Rubio saying the United States appreciates the leadership of our E3 allies in this effort. At the same time, the U.S. remains available for direct engagement with Iran in furtherance of a peaceful and enduring resolution to the Iran nuclear issue. Your reaction, sir?
Well, this is part of the original 2015 nuclear deal that the Obama administration negotiated with the Iranians and these other countries to include Russia and China as part of the Security Council was involved in approving this at the time. So there doesn't have Russia and China cannot veto these snapback sanctions. They would take place automatically in 30 days unless Iran comes back to the negotiating table to discuss the nuclear power development and the fact that it's only civil and there's no enriched uranium. The snapback sanctions would involve an arms embargo, anybody selling arms or parts of it to the Iranians, and that is significant in of itself. Zero enriched uranium, and also an embargo on ballistic missiles and their parts, which is the Iranians' major weapon system we saw in the Israeli 12-day war. So this is a significant step forward. The administration is supporting this as well. And now the ball is in the Iranians' court. What are they going to do? We'll see. But if they're willing to go back into negotiations, or are they just going to stiff this?
We shall see where it goes. General Jack Keane, thank you for taking time. Have a great weekend.
Yeah, Griff, great talking to you, and the team. Have a wonderful weekend.
I'm Steve Ducey.
I'm Brian Kilmeade.
A lot of times, and I'm going to go into kind of a philosophical discussion here. A lot of times, when we listen to world events, we don't see the full arc of history that's tied into that event. And we think in a very reactive way. Oh, Russia invades Ukraine. Russia bad. All right. That's kind of mainstream thought in some circles. So it's important to look at the arc of history. Now let's take a look at Kissinger for a second here. There are many people that hate Kissinger, but do they really know why they hate Kissinger? Or is it that they've been just kind of programmed from the era of Vietnam, in the protesting of Vietnam from the baby boomers, that led to this deep hatred of Kissinger? Now, I've been a fan of Christopher Hitchens. I probably have listened to almost every single video that is published of Christopher Hitchens, and he hated Kissinger. He wrote a book about it, a trial on Kissinger about crimes against humanity, dealing with the overthrow of Chile and especially the bombing of Cambodia. But there's an author that's been researching for almost 20 years, Kissinger. His name is Niall Ferguson. He's one of my favorite historians. Now, most of Niall Ferguson's work is about history and economics. So that was the main reason why I gravitated to Niall Ferguson. Now, he's been writing the second novel for Kissinger. He published the first novel of his years before getting into the White House. All right. It's a pretty phenomenal history. And Kissinger, because he was in the arena for so long, in key Cold War events, because you got to remember, Vietnam was just a data point of a larger Cold War strategy. So Niall Ferguson wrote the first volume of the series, and it's talking about how he grew up. He was living in Nazi Germany and gets to the United States and eventually gets drafted to go back to Germany. And, he's in the war. He's at the Battle of Bulge, and he's part of the team that liberates some of the concentration camps. And this forms him. So when he comes back to the United States and he ends up getting his Ph.D., he's focused, and he went to Harvard, but he's focused on this idea of the Cold War and nuclear capability. So nuclear weapons within a foreign policy strategy. And this launches him into the stratosphere with Rockefeller and Nixon. All right. Kissinger is hated in the United States and maybe even around the world. Right? But do we really understand why we hate him? Now, this kind of dovetails into this whole idea of civility. So in the second volume, it starts to go into the details of this grand strategy. The whole point of Kissinger that a lot of people that wasn't in the know, a lot of people hate him, but don't know why. When the Cambodian bombing started to take place, his colleagues at Harvard ostracized him. They basically turned him into a pariah. And he lost lots of friends, and he mentions this. And so it was a liberal establishment that was anti-war that launched the beginnings of the hate of Kissinger. Now, there's a video called Kissinger that was actually, the interviewer was Niall Ferguson. It's part of the research for the 2-volume series on Kissinger. It's probably the only time that he is being interviewed in a long format to explain his whole life. And when you listen to that video, all right, I listened to it last night, and it's, I think, over an hour long, so we can't play it today. Let's see. What is it? just Kissinger. It's just called Kissinger. It was released in 2012. All right. It's about an hour and 36 minutes, something like that. So an hour and a half long. And it's a great documentary, again, being interviewed by Neil Ferguson. Now, why is Neil doing this? Neil obviously is a historian, very good historian, and looks at data, but more on the economic side. But the Cold War wasn't just about nuclear weapons. It was also about capitalism versus communism. It's the fight against Marxism. It was actually a philosophical battle that had nuclear weapons. All right. Also, I think the reason why Neil Ferguson is researching this was that he was, one, asked to by Kissinger. He didn't want anyone else to do it. And Kissinger gave him his private papers, which over the years have accumulated a lot of information. So this is part of the reason why it's taken so long to write the 2-volume series, especially during the White House years, because that's where the bulk of the papers are coming from. But there was a grand strategy, and there were some missteps because of the grand strategy to fight the Soviets. All right. Now, Neil Ferguson is also talking about this Cold War 2.0 and World War III and how Taiwan is tied into it, and China. And you got to remember, Kissinger opened up China. But the reason why they opened up China was to actually cause Russia to have some instability on their borders with China. And as we gained more influence in Asia, it diverted the attention of Russia with fully focusing on their Western Front in Europe. So when I say the Western Front in Europe, in the perspective of the Soviet Union, not in the perspective of the European Union. So by moving the attention of Russia, all right, and for the United States to engage with China, it diverted the attention and allowed for NATO to start to gain during the Cold War and to help the rebuilding after World War II, because it took decades to get Europe out of the ashes of World War II, economically, industrially, politically, right? So it took it was a decades effort to do it. Kissinger was right in there. Not only that, the length of Kissinger's life of 100 years. Now, again, remember, I heavily influenced by Christopher Hitchens, so I came from the perspective Kissinger bad. But after watching that documentary last night, I came to the realization that Kissinger actually prevented nuclear war. And no one gives him the credit for it. He literally prevented nuclear war. And he just stayed silent about that. His strategy literally prevented us from having a nuclear holocaust. And so it goes back to civility. It's like, you got to check your belief systems at the door and just look at the facts. And if the facts that are given to you provide an insight, then if you want to be intellectually honest, you have to change your perspective. So now some people will still hate Kissinger. But the realization is that he did things that act good or bad that met the grand strategy. And the grand strategy was prevent nuclear war. And then when you look at it from the perspective of that, then you understand that some things that may have seemed that it was an atrocity actually stabilized the conflict between the United States and the Soviet Union. But no one gives him credit for it because no one wants to go into the details of a long 50-year arc. Because it wasn't about Vietnam. It wasn't about Cambodia. It wasn't even about Chile. It was something much, much bigger. And everyone missed it because everyone was reactive about a particular news event. Now, in terms of Chile, what is interesting, and I did a little bit of research yesterday about it, there's something called cyber, it was called CyberNIC, cyber sync. Was it sync or sin? CyberSyn. CyberSyn was a project within Chile where the theory that, now this is happening in 1970s, right? This is 1970 and this is 1970 to 73, right? So this is during Nixon's administration. Kissinger's involved, all right? So Chile has a president that's rising up in popularity, or a candidate for the president that's rising up in popularity. Dino, I think is his name. I'd have to look it up. But he was pushing this idea of democratic socialism. Now, haven't we heard this word before recently with Mamdani? All right. This is a reason why you have to look at the big arc and what Kissinger was worried about. All right. So in Chile, in the early 70s, there was this development of a cybernetic system where it would take inputs from manufacturing, from purchasers, from consumers, and try to do a feedback loop where it's automated. So they were building something rudimentary at the time. They were building something that was very similar, but at a grand economic scale, like how Amazon works. Amazon takes in, think about what Amazon does. Amazon is a cybernetic organism. Amazon is an organism, a social organism. It's cybernetic. A consumer wants something. The means to order is online. You order. They have lots of storage of material or products in warehouses or direct ship. And they have these robots that go into these storage centers and process these orders. And you get it within 2 days or 3 days or whatever. It's a cybernetic system, but at a macro level. Well, Chile was building something similar at a macro level. Now, I don't believe that at a macro level that you can build a cybernetic system, because it's the idea of, can you really model chaos, indeterministic chaos, and be an efficient society? I don't think you can. All right, but you teleport what's going on with cybernetics today and compare it to what was going on in the early 70s. The difference is that now you have artificial intelligence that can speed up the process. Kissinger was involved in overthrowing this. Now, there's another part of this Chile story. In Chile, they were trying to purchase the manufacturing companies that were American owned. Because what was happening is that labor costs were low. American companies would be mining copper, forging or spinning the copper into coils and then shipping it to the United States. And they would use that material to build products. So this democratic socialism that was taking place in Chile wanted to take control of the manufacturing. So you had Ford Motor Company, you had elements of Bank of America, Anaconda Copper, and a few other companies. Pepsi was also another company that was worried that they would lose their assets in Chile. And they were also worried that other assets within South America would be lost if this democratic socialism took place, took hold. And so the CIA was involved in a coup. So you had the State Department, Kissinger, the CIA tied into destroying cybernetics and to prevent this democratic socialism from taking hold. Why? Because they were worried about ICBMs. If they start taking hold and taking control of assets and had a better relationship with the Soviet Union, then you're talking about changes in IBCM use. See, even though Christopher Hitchens was demonizing Kissinger and saying he was a war criminal, didn't understand that if Kissinger didn't do what he did, you and I probably would not be alive. We probably would have never been born because of a nuclear holocaust. And this is the thing that people need to start paying attention to. Now, what does this mean today? We have artificial intelligence that could speed up cybernetics now. We already have elements of cybernetics within our society. I'll give you an example right now. You can use cybernetics and this whole idea to be able to control the money supply automatically. We're a point of sale. You know what the consumption is in real time anywhere in the United States, and it could feed back to the Federal Reserve and adjust interest rates in real time and change and either buy or sell bonds in real time to adjust the yield curve. So you never have inflation. You could build a system to do this because we have the infrastructure now in place to have real-time data. So you don't need a board of governors. But that sounds like, oh, that sounds great. You'll never have inflation. It's all done. But then what it does is it launches in a technocracy. And then it launches in another element of it is that if you institute these types of cybernetic technologies, it institutes this top-down control that's very similar with communism. Capitalism is like, it's messy and it's chaotic, but it's not top-down controlled. It's organic and it's like nature. Nature isn't controlled. There's accidents that happen that allows for mutations. There's accidents that happen that allows for an evolutionary process. That's what we have in capitalism, for better or for worse, because sometimes you have a master predator within the ecosystem. Sometimes you don't, right? So if we have the ability now, because of artificial intelligence, because of high-speed conductivity of the internet and computer processing power and economic algorithms and training sets to learn for massive efficiencies, we already have just-in-time delivery, JIT. Well, that was the cybernetics that they just didn't use the same terms. That was the cybernetics that they were building up in Chile in the 1970s. So we already at the at the consumer level, at the corporate, private corporate level, we have cybernetics. And there's lots of profit. But what happens when you take cybernetics and you apply it at the government level with the technocracy? That ushers in more of this controlled economies, democratic socialism, all right? So this is a danger. Now, why am I saying this? Who's the Kissinger that was stopping this in our day? Kissinger's dead. Who is the Kissinger today? So Kissinger stopped technocracy. If Kissinger stopped through the grand strategy a nuclear holocaust, if Kissinger stopped this encroachment in our backyard of this democratic socialism, who's the Kissinger today? Because if there's no Kissinger, then the probability of democratic socialism to take hold in our society grows by leaps and bounds, especially if we have a debt default or massive inflation or another mega event like Lehman. Who's the Kissinger in the room? Because we've demonized him. Now do you get it? Do you get it? All right. Talking about civility. All right, let's pivot to World War III. All right, in the perspective from Neil Ferguson on this. This is about 10 minutes long. So before I go in, this is kind of like a philosophical show today, all right? And to actually challenge your beliefs about what was really going on in the last 60 years, 70 years in the United States. And what you think, even if you're a conspiracy theorist, what you think probably needs to be challenged and to be reevaluated, because things are approaching that is the other path if Kissinger didn't do what he did. See, he was at that time, the United States was at a fork in the road. And we went down a path where we didn't go nuclear. But when there's no Kissinger and you're at the fork in the road, which we are at, what's the probability of taking the other path? Because unfortunately, the people that are in the room, they're not as smart as Kissinger. Even though a lot of people hated him, he was a smart guy. All right, let's listen into Niall Ferguson. But before
If
we
you want to build an app and
before we do that, let me just plug a couple products. Please help support the work I do. I do all these videos for free. It takes a lot of time to do these videos. But better yet, if you listen to what I have to say, you'll learn something. And you'll learn on how to improve your health. All right? I know this subject matter really well. So please listen to me and get healthy. All right? Some of the great products that I have in my store are structural nano silver soaps. Structural nano silver soaps are better than the regular soaps that you're using. So you can get it in lavender, you can get it in peppermint, you can also get it in lemongrass and charcoal tea tree. Get a few bars for your household. It's very high quality structural nano silver soaps. Now, the foundation of the protocol, you need to take a multivitamin and a probiotic, preferably from my store. I have very high quality supplements. Now, I have the complete vitamin. The complete vitamin has the multivitamins that you need for proper enzymatic activity, because they are cofactors to allow for your enzymes to work properly, so your cells are working properly, so your tissues are performing properly. That means that your organ systems will perform properly. So the foundation of the protocol is the complete multivitamin. It's easy to digest. And take it with the probiotic. I have it in a powdered form and also a veggie cap form. I prefer to take the powdered form because I take a lot of different powders for my supplements. Now, with a good probiotic, you're helping with your gut biome, you're improving your immune system, you're improving your metabolism, you're helping with your brain function. So it's very important. You're also helping with your skin. So take it, probiotic, go to my store, get the powdered version or the VeggieCap version, and take it with the complete multivitamin. That's the foundation. And throughout the show, we're going to be talking about how to build onto that with the different pillars. So let's go to this. Could an axis of authoritarian regimes ignite a World War III? This is by Neil Ferguson.
No idea how to code or where to start? Check out Base 44. I built this daily habit tracker that helps you.
Dangerous alliance.
Right. I gotta rewind this.
The axis.
My biggest, wildest dream is to be.
There's just too many commercials on YouTube.
Towards World War III, we face not only a cultural crisis, we face a geopolitical crisis.
Now, remember,
At the very same time,
remember the context of this. All right, this was published just 2 months ago. He's in deep research with Kissinger right now to write the second book. Kissinger's dead. There's no other Kissinger. There is geopolitical and financial problems around the horizon that I've been talking about, like the debt cliff with the UK and France and Germany, or even the United States, but the United States is a little bit better off. We'll probably see the debt default of the UK in our lifetime. And then the rising up of China and their desire to take Taiwan and how that's going to check the hegemonic power of the United States. And remember, Taiwan was a bargaining chip during Kissinger to appease the Chinese to get them on our side while we were fighting the Soviet Union during the Cold War. See, Kissinger's dead, and now all the fucking problems are starting to arise that's leading to a high potential kinetic event. And we still have the Damocles of nuclear weapons over our heads ever since we were born.
that we denigrate Western civilization, almost an oxymoron in the eyes of many people. We face an external threat to our civilization from an extraordinarily dangerous axis or coalition of authoritarian regimes. The People's Republic of China, which survived the crisis of 1989 and remains a communist dictatorship. The Russia of Vladimir Putin, which is a kind of revamped Russian empire with him as some kind of latter-day Tsar. The theocracy of the Islamic Republic of Iran, and let's not forget Little Rocket Man in North Korea. These four regimes together, an astonishingly dangerous alliance, I've called it the axis of ill will. They have very different ideologies, but they have a common purpose, which is to end American primacy and undermine the principles of the Western world, democracy, the rule of law.
Now pay attention to this. Where is the United States in terms of its debt? It's at high levels. The interest alone is equal to or surpasses our defense spending. With the new bill that was passed, I believe our defense spending is above now our interest payments, but it's damn close. Damn close. For us to fight this, we would have to pump so much money in for the war effort. We can't afford it. We had a cushion during World War II because we didn't have that much debt. We were able to finance a war Can we really finance a war now? And then on top of the social unrest between the Democrats and the Republicans, between ultra stupidity and conservatism, socially, we can't absorb this. Let's continue. We're in dangerous territory because there's no Kissinger. There's no Kissinger out there. It's done.
So even as we are filled with self-doubt about our own civilization, even as we teach a new generation that in truth, America was founded on white supremacy, that Western civilization was just imperial exploitation, even as we have this self-doubt, this coalition, this axis of ill will is moving to attack us. Now, at first, it attacks the weak outlying democracies. Ukraine, Israel, presumably Taiwan will be next. But nobody should be in any doubt that the ultimate objective is to attack us and to create a world in which these unfree states are dominant. That, I think, is not to overstate the case. Could it produce World War III? Well, we're in Cold War II already. And I think we've been in the second Cold War for about 5 years. Chinese regime has taken the place of the Soviet Union. It's now the superpower. As in the first Cold War, there are two superpowers. As in the first Cold War, one believes in democracy and the other hates democracy. As in the first Cold War, it's a technological contest. But it's not just a nuclear race or a space race, it's an AI race. It's a quantum computing race. So I think we're already in Cold War II.
He's missing one. I'm going to add to what he just said. He's missing one key component. With artificial intelligence and our understanding of genomes and of biology and of virology, it is a war of biological weapons. Because we can, I personally know how to do it. Build from scratch a weapon that's a virus. All right? And I'm not the only one that knows how to do it.
As with the first Cold War, it stays cold. Every Cold War is potentially a hot war. We very nearly blew up the world in 1962 over Cuba. We may yet blow it up over Taiwan. So the geopolitical moment is very reminiscent of early Cold War, with Ukraine a little bit like the Korean War, and Taiwan like the Cuba, waiting to be the focal point of crisis. It's at this moment that we need to educate the new generation to make them aware of two absolutely crucial things. Number one, freedom is not naturally occurring. It needs to be upheld by constitutional means and by a constant renewal of the ideals of democracy and individual liberty. Secondly, that there are always going to be threats to democratic orders from undemocratic authoritarian states. And those states will have one inbuilt advantage, which is that they will be able to divert resources into warfare, into their military, even as we would prefer to spend our money on peaceful things. And that is why this is such a juncture in history as we haven't seen, I think, since the 1930s. I used to be skeptical of analogies with the 1930s. I used to say they were overdone. But we're now at the point with two wars raging, one in Ukraine, one in Israel, with four authoritarian regimes.
Now, what's interesting here, because I've been listening and paying attention to Neil Ferguson, going all the way back to his Ascent of Money book. All right, he came onto the scene roughly at around the time just before Lehman. I met the guy at INET, which was part of George Soros's think tank, economic think tank. All right. Now, what is interesting here is that he was talking about, well, maybe the comparison between the 1930s, maybe even the late 1920s is overdone. But when he was in that belief, that was when Kissinger was still alive and still a player. Kissinger was a player damn near the end of his life. This geopolitical strategy has been built up to prevent nuclear war. It's on a house of cards. Well, who's balancing the table now? Nobody. So now this comparison of what is going on in the late 1920s and 30s, economically, socially, geopolitically, is starting to rear its head again. In a strange way, Kissinger was a gift to prevent a Holocaust. And now the gift is gone. Now what do you do? What do we do? Who's in the room that has the grand strategy?
With the United States divided, weighed down by debt, very unlike Britain between the First and Second World War, we're now at a point when the 1930s analogy starts to make sense.
Why are free speech and intellectual rigor so important?
One of the most interesting.
Hello, my name is Adam Ferrari, Chief Executive Officer of Phoenix Energy. I look forward to you joining us at our next investor webinar, where you can drill deeper.
One of the most interesting things about the Cold War was that it turned out being a free society gave you an advantage. George Orwell didn't foresee this. When he coined the term Cold War, it was in 1945, he thought that the atomic powers would all be totalitarian. And that, of course, led to his great novel, 1984. Orwell was right about many things. But the United States did not become an unfree society with telescreens in everybody's apartment, nor did Britain. The free world stayed remarkably free. Wasn't perfect, but it was a lot better than the Soviet world. And ultimately, the United States and its allies won the first Cold War because they have freedom. Out of intellectual freedom comes greater innovation. It's very hard to be truly innovative in an unfree society because there are no rewards for original thinking, only risks and punishments. So luckily, freedom, in addition to being inherently good, has spin-off benefits. You're better at innovating. A few years ago, people thought that China would win the artificial intelligence race. I can remember the arguments. They have more data, they have fewer restraints on what they can do with it. Turned out to be wrong. It turned out to be American companies that made the big breakthrough with large language models, American companies with some very talented British data scientists too. So the lesson of history is that a free society is also a stronger society. It's not accidental that the United States is still the biggest economy in the world. Being America has been partly resource endowment. North American continent has a lot to offer, but it's also the institutional benefit of running that resource-rich North American continent with the operating system of democracy and rule of law. So I'm ultimately an optimist. If we do the right thing ourselves, maintain individual freedom, maintain a constitutional order, allow free thought to predominate, then we should outperform these slave states, these totalitarian regimes that we're up against. Because there, and I know this from personal experience, having taught on a Chinese university campus, it gets progressively harder to think and speak freely in that environment. The tragedy would be if we in the free world threw away our advantage, as I think we've been doing, by making free thought harder, by making free speech more dangerous, by imposing a certain conformity on thinking, so that to survive at an American university today is to lie, is to self-censor. If we go down that path, we give up our great advantage. We take the secret sauce of freedom and we throw it away. If we do that, then we will deserve to lose the Second Cold War.
What did you see while teaching in China?
The fascinating thing about being a visiting professor at Tsinghua, I guess it was from 2014 to 2019 was watching that place change. At the beginning, Xi Jinping had only been in power for a couple of years. The classroom was remarkably free. In fact, I used to joke that it was a kind of freer atmosphere than back where I was still working at Harvard. That changed. In fact, with every passing year, one felt less able to speak, and one saw one's colleagues feel more inhibited because Xi Jinping increasingly tightened the Communist Party's control over the university during those years. By the end, I was being warned to avoid this topic, not to show that slide. It was a strange experience, particularly as I could see amongst the students very much the same desire for free debate and discussion that I've encountered amongst students since we started the University of Austin. Our forbidden courses were a success, partly because the students came to us from established universities and for the first time were able to speak freely in class. And I saw something of that in China. I can remember teaching a very crowded classroom of students at the School of Economics and Management at Tsinghua in 2016. And my course was simply titled The World in China, and it was a history course. And I fearlessly went there. I talked about Mao, I talked about his role in the great disasters of the Great Leap Forward and the Cultural Revolution. And one of my Chinese colleagues said at one point, keep doing what you're doing, because we cannot. So I had a certain license as an outsider. I was able to come and talk about more or less taboo subjects in the classroom, which the students, I think, found interesting and exciting. But I couldn't do that now. That period of relative liberalization on Chinese university campuses is over. I know that because former colleagues now have to study Xi Jinping thought. They're compulsory courses in Xi Jinping's thought now for Chinese academics. So I've watched that clampdown happen, and I've watched
Now let's pay attention to what's going on with Trump. Trump is basically saying, hey, stop sending the jobs overseas. We're going to need to build up for a war effort against China. We need to reduce our exposure with goods that are being made in China, being shipped to the United States. And Wall Street's having a hissy because they're used to ungodly profit because of the labor arbitrage, regulatory arbitrage. And when you have a society like New York that's just pushing paper, that doesn't make anything, just pushes paper, they would prefer a society where we import goods and we get foreign money to buy the bond market. Because Wall Street makes money doing that. Wall Street wouldn't make money if there were no foreign buyers of our wonderful treasuries. But if you bring economic clustering back to the Midwest and the South, what does Wall Street do? There's not as much paper to push. While Middle America is building stuff. They can't have that. That would mean that you have a power shift in the United States. You would mean that the power is shifting closer to the center of the country, not from the east or west coast. Can't have that. So we got to demonize Trump. That everything he does is bad. See, what is happening is big. It's not just one small data point. It's not just about tariffs. It's not just about the interest rate from the Federal Reserve. It's colossal what's happening.
In flame of intellectual freedom snuffed out.
If you like this clip, it is part of a much longer conversation that is only available at dadsavesamerica.com. So head on over there.
Now,
and
there's
subscribe.
nothing wrong with people that do that. You know, where they do a 10-minute segment and then they say, go to my Patreon or go to Substack and you see the whole thing. That's how they make money. I don't do that. I do long format. I tell you how it is. I don't do any scripting or anything like that. I don't do post-processing. I don't put stuff behind a paywall because I feel as though the information and the times that we're in, we have to talk, we have to engage, and we have to solve the problem, or we're going to be glowing in the dark. So I don't put stuff behind a paywall because the things that I'm talking about are like really important, like super important. But when there's something that's super important with other podcasters, they want to try to monetize it. They want to try to monetize it in ad revenue or in subscriber fees. What I want you to do is learn and solve the problem so I don't wake up one day and glow in the dark because of a nuclear war. Don't trust people that overly put stuff behind a paywall. Lesson learned, okay? All right, please go to my store, help support the work that I do. Again, all these videos are for free. The ubiquinol and the NAD+. NAD+ is a supplement that will boost up your NAD+ levels, increase your energy, help to repair DNA damage, and protect your neurons. Super important if you're age 40 or older. Better start protecting your neurons. We are still feeling the after effects of 2020, and in the next 5 years, there are going to be many people that you know that are going to have elements of early onset of dementia or Parkinsonian issues with motor coordination. Take ubiquinol. Ubiquinol is the most bioavailable form of CoQ10. You can't get anything better than this. So if you're taking CoQ10, chances are you're probably taking the wrong stuff. There's nothing better than what's in my hand in terms of CoQ10. So get the ubiquinol, take it every day. It's going to soak up free radicals, help with the health of the mitochondria, boost up your energy levels, and protect your neuron. Stack it with the NAD+, and that's a near neurostack. And that way, you can be like a Kissinger. All right. I want to listen in to, let's see here. Putin and Xi exposed. China expert reveals the hidden tension between the world's dictators. Let's listen in to Times Radio here.
It's a cold-blooded strategic partnership built upon shared interests and built upon a shared vision of the world. China was spying, pretty full-on spying against Russia. What they don't talk about so much, because it doesn't suit them at the moment, is that the most rapacious foreign power in the 19th century was Russia. For two militaries to really work effectively together, they have to share a lot of systems, a lot of know-how, the ways in which they look towards a battle, the strategies, the weaponry, and there's very little of that in the relationship between Russia and China. My name is Ian Williams, a long-time foreign correspondent in Russia, China, the Far East, more recently an author of several books on China, 2 novels, 3 non-fiction books, one looking at the surveillance state, another at geopolitics. The most recent, Vampire State, the rise and fall of the Chinese economy, looks to try and understand how China's predatory economy works, the challenges it faces, and the consequences of the economy going pear-shaped, facing difficulties, and the consequences for both China and for the world. I think that the most significant meetings started to take place after Xi Jinping became leader of the Chinese Communist Party. Vladimir Putin and Xi Jinping have very similar worldviews. Xi Jinping believes in what he calls the China dream, which is the restoration of a great China, whereas Vladimir Putin has his Ruski Mir, the Russian world, the re-establishment of the Russian-speaking world. These are very much imperialist visions of the restoration of national greatness, very much nationalistic. This is a shared vision, a shared passion. But I think the thing that draws them together most strongly is their unity in being suspicious and hostile towards the West and towards the United States in particular. And this is something they share, something that's driven their relationship, something which underlines their relationship over Ukraine. So in many ways, it's a cold-blooded strategic partnership built upon shared interests and built upon a shared vision of the world and a hostility towards a system which is dominated by the United States. I think they see a shared interest in courting what's become known as the global south. It used to be described in other ways, the third world, developing countries. They both see themselves as champions of the global south, but the China approach is very much built upon the sense that they believe their system is one that can be emulated, their system is one that is superior, their system is one that can be adopted by other countries as a growth model, whereas Russia no longer really takes that view since the collapse of the Soviet Union. Certainly during the Cold War, both China and Russia competed in what was then described as the third world to try and push their ideology, their competing visions of revolution and communism. These days, Russia doesn't really bother. It's a far more cynical approach to the world, whereas China still has the view that its system is one that can be copied and emulated and will bring development and economic growth to those countries, built upon state capitalism, authoritarianism. These are very much the principles, whereas Russia doesn't see itself in that role anymore. It doesn't actively try and sell its system to the world, although it is keen to influence countries outside its immediate orbit. When you look at their attitudes towards the system, towards the international rules-based system, as it's sometimes described, it's a tricky concept.
Let me just interject really quick here. My take on the whole China-Russia contemporary relationship, all right, you have to, again, go back to what was going on with Kissinger. During Mao, China was not an industrial power at all. People were starving, right? There was revolution that was taking place. But the United States wanted to use China as a means to be able to reduce the concentration or the bandwidth for the Soviet Union in the European theater. On top of, there was this little thing called Vietnam, and the thought was that by having better relations with China, that the United States could de-escalate the war and retreat from Vietnam with less disgrace, all right, with some sort of saving face. That part of the strategy didn't work, all right? But that was part of the strategy, was the Vietnam strategy and the strategy against the Soviet Union. And slowly opening up economic relations with China and the United States that really accelerated under Bush Jr. with favored status. So, okay, you have that context. Another aspect to this was that during the Kissinger years, China, Mao China, was kind of like the son, all right? Let's put it, the son of the father, which was the Soviet Union, all right? Because they were, China is communist, but they were really a smaller version of the Soviet Union, a weaker version. So the father is the Soviet Union. The father is Karl Marx and Lenin and, right, Stalin and, right. So this the father now, it has gone into the twilight years of their life. All right. And that's what Putin is representing, of this old Soviet Union broken up and now is turned into what we call Russia. But Putin represents this country that wants to reconstitute to a greater Russia, an old Soviet Union. He still has this kind of Cold War 1.0 mentality, all right? But they're aged. They're aged in terms of economic prowess, the buildup of the countries in Europe being able to circumvent a reconstitution of the Soviet Union through NATO, right? The countries within Europe have built up their society. They're stronger than after World War II, right? Because they were decimated after World War II. So to be able to reconstitute the Soviet Union is going to be much harder. So the Soviet Union is a 90-year-old, let's say, in a nursing home, all right? But China has grown. So as Russia has weakened, as the Soviet Union has weakened, China has grown economically. Now, it has lots of problems. It has big economic problems. They have a population problem, a population reduction, because of their one-child policy that's rearing itself to having problems for economic growth now. So China has problems, but China is like now in their 40s. So it's like a 40-year-old compared to an 80-year-old. So China, the kid, the child of the Soviet Union, is now has superseded the father. And this is the dynamic, I think, that from my perspective, is what's going on between Xi Jinping's China and Putin's Russia.
But broadly speaking, it's a set of institutions and rules, the way the international system comes together, which was introduced by the victors of the Second World War, inevitably dominated by Western countries, and particularly by the United States. Both China and Russia are hostile to that system. But whereas Russia very much takes a view that they want to undermine that system in every way they can and at every opportunity, China is more concerned about trying to replace that system. It's been actively trying to build alternative structures, alternative institutions, while at the same time seeking to hack existing institutions, be they financial, the United Nations, with its own people, and also to set international standards, particularly on technology, for instance, on facial recognition, on other surveillance technologies, because standards are very important in influencing the adoption of technology internationally. So China's vision of replacing the rules-based international order, its vision of replacing a system which has been dominated by the West, is by creating its own alternative system, its own alternative institutions. Whereas Russia is much more destructive. Russia seeks to undermine the international system rather than replace it. And I think that while they share...
Russia doesn't have the resources to create a new system, while China has the resources. Plus, Russia is more Western culture than Asian culture. And Asian culture is much different than Western culture. So it's easier to create something new if you're a different culture, right? All right. So this is part of this whole, where's the Kissinger these days, right? We don't have a Kissinger anymore. China is creating a system that is to compete with and try to surpass the American system. Now, if the war starts to happen in the Pacific, which I think it will, and the United States loses, let's say we lose the first island chains and we have to retreat. We may even lose Hawaii or elements of Alaska. And we retreat. We probably spent a lot of money that will have a lot of debt. And then the whole malaise of a loss, a major loss, a war loss, would change the psyche of the United States. And there will be people that are in the democratic socialism type realm that will want to take lessons learned from China and adopt them into the United States. Now, this is not far-fetched because this is exactly what was happening during the Great Depression, where there was a failure of the economic system of capitalism, and there were elements within the United States that wanted to adopt either fascism or this communism. Now, thankfully, it didn't take hold. But it's not out of the realm of possibility. And because of strong regions, economic regions in the United States like New York, right? Financial hubs like New York, that are already teetering towards socialism. They're already teetering. Mamdani is probably going to be the mayor of New York. It's a high probability, maybe 80% probability, based on the polls right now. Well, if that's the case, and let's say a couple of years later, we go into war and we lose with China, you're going to have lots of hotspots with this democratic socialism. And it kind of goes even deeper with the Fabian Society. And there are like 3 different, that's coming from the UK, but it was kind of like trying to slowly, incrementally change the society towards socialism. That's the Fabian Society. And there are elements of this with Podesta. There's elements of this with AOC. You have these different organizations within, I'd have to look up what the name of the organizations are, but there are these 3 or 4 main organizations. Some of them are outright aggressive, so they're not tied to the Fabian Society. They're more aggressive in terms of pushing democratic socialism. And then there are about 2 of the organizations are more or less think tanks that are similar to the Fabian Society, but are not officially the Fabian Society. But the point is that there are institutions that are already established that would be able to benefit from a lost war in the Pacific by the United States and push their democratic socialism agenda. Here's another reason that Kissinger was right. You have to prevent this from happening. Where's Kissinger?
To what exists at the moment, they're very different in terms of their visions for what may replace it. I think that there is all sorts of aspects in which they're competing. Not long ago, documents were leaked to the New York Times suggesting that the FSB, which is the successor to the KGB, the domestic intelligence service in Russia, documents which suggested that China was spying, pretty full-on spying against Russia, trying to figure out what Russia was doing in Ukraine, the performance of weapons, as well as policy, what was going on within the Russian government. Now, this suggested 2 things. One, that within the Russian government were those who were less than enamored with the close relationship that was developing with China, but also that Russia was not really sharing with China the sort of technical know-how the sort of strategic know-how, the sort of information about the performance of weapon systems, whether they be kinetic or whether they be cyber, within Ukraine, which China is very keen to know about because some of its own systems are quite similar to those of Russia, and some of the organization of its armed forces are quite similar. So there are tensions beneath the surface. Historically, you could argue that this is a relationship that should never exist anyway, given the animosity that's been there historically. We talk about the Cold War between the Soviet Union and the Soviet bloc and the American-led Western alliance. But of course, another Cold War took place over 3 decades, the frozen border between the Soviet Union and China, along which there were multiple clashes, along which many people died, along which almost triggered at one point a nuclear exchange. The two sides barely talked to each other for 3 decades before a rapprochement by Mikhail Gorbachev in his first visit to Beijing in 1989 brought the two sides closer together again. We forget that China bangs on a lot about 100 years of humiliation. It talks a lot about unequal treaties, about the way in which rapacious Western powers took parts of China, such as Hong Kong, for instance, Western concessions in Shanghai. What they don't talk about so much, because it doesn't suit them at the moment, is that the most rapacious foreign power in the 19th century was Russia. Russia bit off 1.5 million kilometers of Chinese territory, including huge swathes to the north of the Amur River, the Russian Far East, the Russian city of Vladivostok, now home to the Pacific Fleet. That used to be known in Chinese as Haishan Wai, which means Sea Cucumber Bay, and Chinese nationalists haven't forgotten that. A new law only a couple of years back decreed that all textbooks in China should carry the original Chinese names of these Russian areas, which caused some consternation in Russia. So these are built-in tensions. Officially, these border disputes have been settled, unofficially not. There's a lot of neuroses, a lot of suspicion, particularly in the Russian Far East, underpopulated, but big on resources, about the intentions of a very populist and very resource-hungry China just across the border. Chinese nationalists dream of restoring the borders of the Qing dynasty, which of course includes large chunks of modern-day Russia. So there are all these inherent tensions, historic and contemporary. We should remember as well that although we read and see a lot about joint military exercises between Russia and China, these have grown in scope, both in terms of the geographical reach, in terms of the ambition. But when we look at them close, there isn't the same interoperability as you will get within NATO, for instance, or between America and its allies in Asia, be they Korea or Japan. And interoperability is a big thing for military strategists, because for two militaries to really work effectively together, they have to share a lot of systems, a lot of know-how, the ways in which they look towards a battle, the strategies, the weaponry. And there's very little of that in the relationship between Russia and China. Now these exercises are not entirely performative, but they are not of the same nature and the same closeness as what you see between NATO allies, or, as I say, between Western democracies and Korea or Japan. So it is a very different relationship. And yes, you have seen it described as a no-limits partnership. That description came just on the eve of Russia's invasion of Ukraine. And they boasted that it's closer than allies, but it's not an alliance in a meaningful sense of that. It's very much opportunistic. It's very much a marriage of convenience, and it contains a lot of tensions. It suits them at the moment because strategically, both of them benefit from it. But it's a cold-blooded calculus, and I think that shouldn't be forgotten. There is a term that does the rounds in Washington called doing a reverse Kissinger. Some of those close to Donald Trump have argued that he can prize Russia away from China, that the real medium-term concern for the United States is China, not Russia, and that if he can prize Russia away from China.
Let me just give you a backstory and to explain this term. So Kissinger, like I explained earlier in the video, went to China to be that wedge to try to weaken the Soviet Union. And reverse Kissinger basically means become more friendly to Russia and start preparing for war against China. Now, I fall in that category, reverse Kissinger strategy, all right, or the view on how to approach this. I think bringing in Russia into the Western fold, there's more in common with Russia, with the Western society, than there is with the Asian society. On top of that, having that multiple front war is going to be able to do a pincer move on China. So the United States hits them in the Navy, at the naval, so east of China, and Russia can hit them from the north. And if we can get India in the fold, we can hit them in the south, hit the China in the south. So I think that strategy is actually a good strategy. But again, what is Kissinger really focused on? It wasn't so much the Soviet Union as a country. He was this strategy goes above nation state level. This strategy is against communism and to try to prevent nuclear war and to prevent communism to taking over in the world and into the United States and destroying capitalism. That's what his grand strategy was. Stop nuclear war, prevent the nuclear war, and stop the encroachment of Marxism. That's the grand strategy. So it's not about the country. Now, is Russia communist? Actually, it's kind of a little bit more capitalistic now. It's a little bit more open market because of the fall of the Soviet Union. So it's not really communist. Now, China, on this the communist spectrum, if you want to look at it from communism and capitalism perspective, all right, United States is on the capitalist side of this. China, all right, has an open market, so they're not 100% communist, all right? They have an open market, but it's one-party system. So the old Soviet Union was on the other side of the spectrum compared to the United States. So you have the Soviet Union and the United States. You have China, modern-day China, that is closer to the old Soviet Union. They are the CCP, right? They're communists, but they have an open market, so it's a little bit closer to the center of the spectrum, but not to the center. It's moving towards capitalism, but it's much closer to the old Soviet Union way of doing things. But it has an open market, all right? And it has a dynamic economy because of this open market. So it's like communism with Hong Kong, all right? View it like that. Now you have Russia. Now Russia, even though it doesn't have a very strong economy, it's more of an open market before the whole sanctions and all this stuff, because it's not as controlled of an economy. So I see this as a spectrum here. The United States on one end, old Soviet Union on the other, Russia in the middle, and China between Russia and the Soviet Union in terms of this alignment on this continuum of economic theory or economic
An economy is an area of the production, distribution, and trade, as well as consumption
Hey,
of goods
Siri.
and services.
Stop. I didn't say Siri. And she just automatically starts talking. All right. Welcome to technocracy. So that's the world that we're living in today. So doing a quote reverse Kissinger is being a Kissinger, is the point I'm making. Because the Soviet Union is no longer. And Russia is nothing like the Soviet Union was. It's different. China, on the other hand, is like the Soviet Union, but is different. But it's closer to the Soviet Union because there's one party rule and this Xi Jinping dictatorship that's taking place there. So we have to, in their economic prowess is more dangerous to the United States. Russia's dangerous to the United States because of the nuclear weapons, but not because of their economy. China is dangerous because of their economy and their nuclear weapons. All right, so the foe is really CCP, not Russia. So doing a reverse Kissinger and focusing on and bringing Russia into the fold of the Western alliance is a smart move. But being a reverse Kissinger is not an anti-Kissinger. It's the same strategy. It's just the players are different.
Yeah. Then you will be in a position where the United States will be immensely stronger in its competition with China. Now, I think that is really wishful thinking. I don't think Russia can be prized away from China because although there are historic animosities, or
Russia can be, I think can be pried away from China. But Putin probably has to die. Because Putin's not willing to take the off ramp. And he's just too he's too focused on this old Cold War mindset. It's not Putin that we need. We need to align with the next leader of Russia.
there are clearly still tensions in the relationship. It just suits them too much at the moment. Strategically, it's too important for them. They both get too much out of it, economically, diplomatically, strategically, for it to be undermined. And I think for those close to the Trump administration to suggest somehow that there will be a Kissinger goes to China moment, that somehow Russia can be prized away, that Putin in his bromance with Trump can turn his back on China. I think this is wishful thinking. Russia will clearly play along Trump. It's been very effective at doing that. But I don't see any way in which
What's some of the lessons learned of what happened during the Kissinger days with Mao? They dangled the whole idea, because you got to remember, this is taking place in the 70s. The Korean War was already over. Vietnam wasn't finished yet. All right. And you had this little island called Taiwan. And Mao wanted Taiwan. But Chiang Kai-shek was already in Taiwan. And there was this battle of who should be running Greater China, Mao or Chiang Kai-shek. The United States, during the early days of the Cold War, under Eisenhower and under Truman, it seemed to be aligning with Chiang Kai-shek and against Mao, because Mao was communist. All right. Now, when Kissinger came around and made the deal with Mao, it was basically selling Taiwan down the river to stabilize the region. But we were ambiguous with our policy, because it was like 2 countries but 1 system kind of mentality. Something similar might happen with the peace agreement in Ukraine. The eastern side of Ukraine is going to have to be the bargaining chip to get Russia into the fold with the Western alliance. That is from the perspective of the United States. The problem comes in is that you have this debt problem in the UK, and they can't allow for quantitative tightening. So the UK and France keep on pushing for war within Ukraine to prevent the bond yields from going to the moon. Because if there's peace in the region, then that's going to open up the door for the central banks to start doing quantitative tightening. Because they still have a lot of assets on the balance sheet from COVID era and from the Lehman era. So you have these conflicting systems because of the debt of the UK. But the real bargaining chip here is the eastern side of Ukraine, just like the bargaining chip back in the 70s was Taiwan. So this system that we're dealing with is much bigger than Russia came in and Ukraine is trying to defend itself. That's parochial thinking. That's surface level. That's like elementary school.
China in the current context. I think if and when that relationship does come under greater tension, it will be because of inherent difficulties, inherent tensions within the relationship, not because of any desire to get closer to the Trump administration. There's a very curious red line which China has tiptoed up to, and some would argue has crossed, in terms of its relationship with Russia over the Ukraine war. If we turn the clock back slightly to a meeting ahead of the Beijing Olympics, Winter Olympics, between Putin and Xi, when they declared their no limits partnership, a few days later, Russia invaded Ukraine, and there was a lot of speculation about whether China was tipped off, whether China knew about it, but was preferred not to ask about it. But it seems inconceivable that they weren't given some sort of advanced knowledge of Russia's invasion of Ukraine. Now, the war in Ukraine, 3 years on, would not be sustainable without Chinese support for Russia. Russia is effectively underwriting the war in Ukraine economically, by buying vast amounts of raw materials from Russia, strategically by giving Russia diplomatic cover, also by supplying dual-use items, whether these are machine tools, drones, chips, other items which can be used in the production of weapons by Russia. There's also been suggestions of weapons themselves finding their way into Russia. A number of companies have been sanctioned in China, in Hong Kong, for supporting Chinese companies, for supporting the Russian war effort. Now, clearly, China benefits enormously economically because of its access to cheap raw materials. It's a buyer's market. Russia can't really sell it to many places. So China can in many ways dictate the price. Strategically, it's also very valuable for China. And I think diplomats have hardly tried to make this secret, that as long as the Russian war attracts the attention of the West and of the United States in particular, as long as their focus is on Europe, on Ukraine, then the focus is not so much on Asia. So one fear in Beijing is that if and when the war in Ukraine ends, then the United States and its allies will be able to shift their focus more towards Asia, more towards the Pacific, and more towards the defense of Taiwan. So it suits.
Now think about this.
China.
I'm not a big fan of Zelensky at all. And I'm upset with Putin. DrPaulCottrell is upset with Putin. Details at 11. Because he's not taking the off-ramp. There's hubris with Putin. So I think Putin should be assassinated. But the thing is that Zelensky, yeah, I understand he's losing territory with his country. He could lose a lot more if it wasn't for the backing of the United States and of the European Union. But the thing here is that because he's so focused on his own country, he's not realizing the big global strategic issue here. That if we are bogged down in a war in Ukraine or in some sort of European theater war, and we can't adequately put our resources towards a Pacific front, it is highly probable that the United States will lose its hegemonic power. Now, I would rather have Ukraine go to Russia in lock, stock, and barrel before we lose hegemonic power in the Pacific. And this is where Zelensky doesn't understand that this is a much larger, grand strategy. And he needs to start playing ball and de-escalating this situation. The problem is that you have Putin that's playing this tough guy character and it's not willing to take the off ramp. Putin will be far better off aligning with the United States. And the United States will be far better off in being able to concentrate the war effort against China. But Zelensky is a major problem. Putin's a major problem too because he's not taking off ramp. But Zelensky is so focused on just Ukraine, he doesn't understand that the United States could lose its hegemonic power because of Ukraine. We can't be bogged down in that war. We can't. The Europeans can't fight China. It's only the United States. They can help, but who's really going to be the spearhead? It's going to be the United States militaries, especially the Navy and the Marines. So Zelensky doesn't understand. What's more important? What's more important? Prevent socialism and communism to take hold in the whole world? Or defend Ukraine? Which one's more? I know this sound, let's just assume that it's simplistic results. And it's deontological. All right? Support Ukraine, prevent Russia from taking more land, but lose the war in the Pacific. Or let Ukraine fall and win the war in the Pacific and maintain hegemonic power for the United States. Which one do you pick? Which one do you pick? Once again, where's the Kissinger? And now it's easier to understand that if you look at things simplistically, why people were demonizing Kissinger and not actually seeing that the grand strategy worked. Ukraine has to fall if Putin, or at least Ukraine has to lose a big section of its territory, let's say not necessarily fall, but lose big sections of its territory so the United States can focus on the Asian theater. Preferably, if we can bring Russia into the Western fold, it'll be easier for us to have the war with China. So Ukraine is not that important for the United States, but it can become a major hindrance on our ability to maintain our hegemonic power. But Zelensky is going to have his way. Zelensky has to have his way. And then you have the European whiners continuing on the war effort in the East, the Eastern Front of Europe with Russia, because they can't sell the bonds. They can't have quantitative tightening. We're in a pickle with international affairs. And the solution may be let Ukraine lose. Because what is better for America? And then you have all these war hawks out there that are, have a hard on, based on the World War, this post World War II Cold War mentality of the Soviet Union. And because of that strategy of Russia bad, we're losing our focus in Asia. Sometimes you have to make, I think the lesson learned from Kissinger is that sometimes you have to make bad decisions to prevent something really bad from happening.
Beijing, it suits Xi to have all this attention on Ukraine, to have Ukraine bubbling away, because it gives him a potentially freer hand in the Pacific. I think that it would be a major blow to Xi if Putin were to be humiliated in Ukraine, and indeed if Putin was to lose power as a result of that, because the two are very close, because the two have similar mindsets in terms of their view of their country's role in the world, their imperialistic attitude towards restoring national greatness, their close partnership.
Let's just look at this with with the brass tacks. All right. How long would it take to actually defeat Putin in Ukraine? How much money would it take, and who would have to be involved? Now remember, the CCP has already telegraphed that they want Taiwan in 2027. Well, last I looked, 2027 minus 2025 is 2 years. You really think that this whole Ukrainian war will end in 2 years? And that we would have the prowess to be able to fight a Asian front right after? We don't have time for this.
Any humiliation, defeat, demise of Putin would inevitably, I think, be damaging for Xi. There are many books that have been written about the role of leadership, of the role of relationship between leaders in shaping diplomacy. For instance, you could argue that during the Cold War between the Soviet Union and China, the relationship between Stalin and Mao, and then Stalin and Khrushchev, was so toxic, was so bad, that it very much drove the broader relationship between the two countries because they had such a poor relationship on a personal level. Now, I think however you look
and
at
Kissinger used that as leverage, as a way to put a wedge between China and the Soviet Union. So a reverse Kissinger strategy may actually work if we bring Russia into the Western fold. But that would mean that the Europeans would have to say, okay, we're going to stop this old mentality of a Cold War with Russia, and we're going to help the United States with the grand strategy to prevent Taiwan from being captured by the Chinese. Oh, the bankers are going to say, well, wait a minute here. The bond yields are going to go up. The central banks are going to have to sell some bonds into the market. And so you have the bankers that are basically telling what they want to be done in Europe. UK will go bankrupt if quantitative tightening takes place. They will go bankrupt. So if they go bankrupt, how's this going to affect the whole global market? Is it that we're going to see 1929 all over again? Does that mean that we're going to revisit some of the turmoil, economic turmoil around the world because of some sort of contagion, because the UK defaults? Or is it better to just continue the war in the Eastern Front so the central banks don't do quantitative tightening? there's no incentive for England to play ball with the United States in terms of China.
Broader Russia-China relationship and the calculus and the cold calculus on both sides towards benefits from it. There is a strong relationship between Xi and between Putin because they do share this vision of the world and they do share an idea about their country's relative places in the world and the need to replace the existing order.
Russia under Putin is an 80-year-old. Xi Jinping, for China, is a 40-year-old. And what that basically means is the son has more vitality than the father. This whole old style Soviet Union stuff is just so Cold War 1.0. It's not relevant. It's a better strategy for the United States and the Western Alliance to bring Russia into its fold. And I think Russia even knows this, but internal politics with the oligarchs, I mean, if Putin stops the war and all the dead body, and then they go, well, where's the soldiers? I mean, they had massive casualties to maintain this war effort. How stable is actually Putin's government after a war? Probably not very stable.
So if you take away one of those key players, whether it's Putin because he is defeated or humiliated in Ukraine, or Xi, who knows what's going on at the higher echelons of the Chinese Communist Party with the disappearance of senior figures on the diplomatic front, on the military front. But if one of these key figures goes, I think that it could quite dramatically change the dynamic between the two countries.
We're going to go to live now about Marco Rubio revokes visas of Palestinian president and 80 others ahead of the United Nations. Please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com. Get the magnesium and zinc. This is going to help to boost up your immune system and help with your brain function. Magnesium is super important for brain function. Vitamin C and magnesium, good for brain function, boost up that immune system, and helps with your skin. Take them together. That's a powerful stack. Now, I also want to go over really quickly before we go to live now here. Olive leaf extract, dual purpose. It's going to help with your immune system and help with the cardiovascular system. It brings down inflammation and helps with your lipid profile. Clarity factor, gets rid of brain fog, so you're not a stupid liberal. Gets rid of brain fog and helps with memory, supports memory. Now, drink this with filtered water, and this brain fog is going to go away, and you're going to be able to concentrate on tasks, either at work or at school or just at home. And when you're taking this regularly, what's going to happen is you're going to have positive neuroplasticity. So you're going to have more dendritic connections for your neurons, and you're going to think faster. Your memory is going to be improved. And when you have actually better neural connections, and you proper diet, proper exercise, drink filtered water, stay away from processed foods, you're going to sleep better. When you're sleeping better, you're also consolidating memory and detoxifying your central nervous system and improving those neural connections. So it's really important. So as a stack, it's like a pretty powerful neural stack would be the clarity factor, the vitamin C with magnesium, and the magnesium and zinc, and you get an added benefit that you're boosting up your immune system. So please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com. Use discount 5, get $5 off any order. If you spend $100 or more, you get a free gift until supplies last. All right, let's go to live down here about Marco Rubio revoking visas.
Welcome to Conga Composer, the dynamic document generation software.
And welcome back. It's Sue live now from Fox. I'm Andrew Kraft. So in the meantime, like I said before the break, have some of these headlines emanating out of the Middle East. Also, our eyes are focused on the UN General Assembly taking place next month there in New York City. It always takes place each and every September, and there's a lot of politics that goes into pulling it off here. But like I said, well, let's hear from Fox News correspondent Alex Hogan.
I have to interject. All right, I live in New York. I have to deal with the congestion of the European Union. If I was president of the United States, the very first thing I would do is have our Army Corps of Engineers take brick by brick, disassemble the United Nations and dump it into the Atlantic Ocean. All right, but that would just be just me if I was president of the United States, but I'm not president of the United States. But all kidding aside, when this happens, prostitution in New York increases. Now, why is that? You have all these people coming from around the world, delegates, and all of a sudden, they have to get escorts, massage girls. Prostitution becomes rampant during this period of time. But we don't want to talk about that, do we? We don't want to talk about the moral decay of the United Nations.
Between Israel and Hamas there in Gaza.
Israel is declaring Gaza City a dangerous combat zone as its military begins its planned offensive on the famine-gripped area.
We are not waiting. We have begun the preliminary operations and initial stages of the assault on Gaza City.
The return to around-the-clock fighting is expected to displace thousands of Palestinians. The Israeli government argues that a widened is the best way to bring the hostage.
Another aspect of the whole Middle Eastern issue is also a Kissinger thing. When the war in the Sinai Peninsula took place, that was under Nixon. And Kissinger was involved to try to de-escalate it. And there was this arming of the Muslims by the Soviet Union. So one of the Cold War areas of conflict was the Middle East, was this conflict between the Palestinians and the Israelis, between other Arab nations like Saudi Arabia and Israel and Iran and Israel. But then they also had internal conflicts between Iran and Saudi Arabia. And then you had Iraq also tied to this, right, at that time. But that's another Cold War conflict area. So you have now, teleport to 2025 now, you have this European Cold War II hot point in Ukraine. You have a Cold War 2.0 in the Middle East, and you have something boiling up in Asia with Taiwan. So when we keep on hearing in the news, oh, it's just Israel and the Palestinians, independent of the religious point of view, either Christian or Jewish or even Islam's point of view about who owns the land and Temple Mount and all this stuff. Just put that aside. Just look at it from a Cold War perspective. Russia is aligned with Iran. And the Chinese wants to have control all the way into the Middle East and into Africa. So from a Cold War 2.0 perspective, the United States has to stabilize the region. And this will be done by aligning with the Saudis and aligning with Israel. Again, it's about similar conflict points going all the way back to 1970s. So it's way bigger. What's going on with Gaza is way bigger than just Israel and a Palestinian conflict. It's bigger in the sense of who's going to own the Temple Mount and the rebuilding of the temple. And it's also a Cold War 2.0 strategy. But you have lots of people out there demonizing Israel and not really understanding the big picture, the global strategy. What if Israel fell? What if? Let's play this out. What if? Do you think that the Middle East will be aligned in a more peaceful way for democracy? Or would it reconstitute itself in a global jihad pushing a caliphate, especially when you have so many illegal immigrants infiltrating into Europe? If Israel fell, most likely you're going to have these caliphates establishing themselves in Europe. Again, what's the Cold War 2.0 strategy? But it's too easy to just look at this as a conflict between Israel and Gaza. It's too easy to just think that the conflict is just with Russia and Ukraine. Something bigger happening here, much bigger.
His home and cripple Hamas's capacity to launch future attacks.
We will deepen our strikes on Hamas and the other terrorist organizations, and we will not hesitate until we bring back all the hostages and dismantle Hamas both militarily and in terms of governance.
Meanwhile, protests have swelled in Israel as the families of the hostages push for a ceasefire deal that would release their loved ones. Hamas said last week that it accepted a ceasefire plan from Arab mediators. Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu.
So let's think about this. You have people that are liberal in the United States that are keep on pushing the Ukrainian war. You have people that are liberal in the United States that are keep on wanting Israel to lose territory. Both of those strategies are antithetical to stabilizing those two hotspots so the United States can focus on China. Now, either, and this could be not mutually exclusive. It may be mutually inclusive, but either you just have really stupid ultra liberals not understanding the bigger strategy, or you have all the ultra liberals, democratic socialists that have been infiltrated by the Chinese. Because if you're Chinese, what would you want? Would you want to bog down the United States in two areas? Would you want to galvanize the ultra-liberal that is known to cause social disruption in the United States to continue these conflicts? Now, someone would say the ultra-liberal wants peace. You ask the ultra-liberal, what's going on in Ukraine? What do you want? They're not saying peace. They're saying the opposite. Fight Putin more. Are they saying peace in the Middle East? No, they're saying that they want Israel to fall.
Who maintains the military will launch its offensive while simultaneously pursuing a ceasefire.
There's a proposal on the table that Hamas has agreed to. Everyone is sharing our call and everyone wants the hostages back home.
Israel also said Friday its military recovered the bodies of 2 hostages, including an Israeli man who was kidnapped from his home during the October 7th attack. Of the 50 remaining hostages in Gaza, Israel believes that 20 could still be alive. In London, Alex Hogan, Fox News.
Alex, thanks so much.
If you're earning 7 figures and still using a basic box checking CPA, you're leaving over $100,000 a year on the table.
Alex, thanks so much. Let's bring in the conversation Hal Kemper, national security analyst and expert and retired Marine intelligence officer. He joins me.
Hal, you and I have talked about this war for almost 2 years straight here. A renewed offensive there in Gaza City by the Israelis. What's the end goal? What's the aim?
Andrew, what they're trying to do is, well, first off, they're putting tremendous pressure on Hamas. They're trying to get more concessions from them and whatever ceasefire agreement is made. And of course, at the end state, they don't want Hamas to remain as a terrorist organization, a military organization, a paramilitary organization, and they don't want Hamas to remain as a governing organization in Gaza. All of those things go back to the very core of what Hamas perceives itself as being. So Hamas is basically in these existential negotiations where at the end of it, they no longer exist as they do today. So that's a very difficult, tough thing. And hence you see what you see now, which is they're actually doing, some would call them preparatory fires at the outskirts. They're actually kind of reducing the battle space, if you will, moving into the outskirts of Gaza City. And you can bet there's a very detailed plan on how they're reducing the city step by step, based on terrain, based on where people are, based on a lot of different considerations. Of course, obviously wherever Hamas and Palestinian Islamic Jihad, where they're located, and they're basically trying to close the noose on them and try to do it in such a way that they can get as many hostages, live hostages out as possible. And I got to tell you, this is a very complex, difficult operation. And there are a lot of things that can go wrong.
So what if Hamas, realizing the Israelis are successful in this mission, what if they decide to just kill the living hostages they still have in captivity? Isn't that the concern? I mean, isn't that the grave threat here? I mean, Israel's taking a risk, right?
That is an absolute, real possibility. I would say probability, if you will, that if
I know what I'm going to say. I know what I'm going to say is really cold-hearted, but but life is cold. Life is very cold-hearted, right? Do you remember the names of any of the hostages that died in the last few months or even the last year? Do you remember any of their names? No. These hostages, even though they have loved ones that want them back, when you're talking about the bigger issues like nuclear war, like the battle between communism and capitalism, about losing the hegemonic power of the US empire, which one is a little bit more important? Or let's just take it from a religious point of view. The death of these individuals or the rebuilding of the Temple Mount? See, it's too easy with the emotional fallacy to just focus on just the individuals. Because that's, if it bleeds, it leads in the news. Oh my God, we got to be so. But the thing is there's something way bigger here. Way bigger. Stop being fearful and just move forward. Because the world will be a better place if we aren't have fear. But that's the reality. When you have patients in, let's say, an ER, all right, and you're doing a triage, and you only have the resources, let's say four people that are mass casualty, all right, in a mass casualty situation, and you know that you can only save 2 out of the 4. They're all of equal unstable situation. But because of the resources you have, you have to pick, and you can't save all 4. You can only save 2. What do you do? What do you do? Just roll the dice? You pick the younger ones? You pick the older ones? You just randomly do it? What do you do? How do you handle a situation like that? Where you pick and choose who dies and who lives? That's the cold-hearted truth of reality.
Their captors will turn around and kill the hostages. And And certainly, as you've seen what Hamas has done to date, there's absolutely no reason to think that they wouldn't do that. That would probably be, you know, I'm not saying the rules of engagement, but that might be something they have as a standing order, which is if you cannot, you know, if you're cornered and there's no way out, you know, kill the hostages and then martyr yourself, and as they would put it. And that's probably what they will try to do. That's why the Israelis are working on this plan the way they are. And, you know, we see the overt stuff. I mean, we see the stuff they talk about, that they're doing these artillery missions, you know, these airstrikes and other things. There are things that we probably won't see, that we may not even hear about for a while, where they're trying to find some other way to get these hostages out. And so we're going to see how this plays out, but they are putting full pressure on Hamas and Palestinian Islamic Jihad right now. And at the end of the day, they do not want Hamas there. Interestingly, the Palestinian, I should say the Arab League, also agrees that Hamas should not be armed and should not be a governance organization. And that just tells you how much has happened in the last 2 years to see that huge political, you know, shift take place.
So Hal, let's move from the Middle East and go to New York. We have a live picture there. You know, the UN General Assembly is always a pretty big deal, diplomatically speaking, each and every September in the Big Apple. So we're hearing from Secretary of State Rubio today.
Just a reminder, prostitution goes up in New York at the same time. But I'm sure that's just a coincidence.
So he has revoked Hal.
Scroll less, learn more. Find your school district's plan at ny.gov/phone free.
The Frame Pro with wireless One Connect box.
So he has revoked Hal the visas of a number of Palestinian Authority and Palestine Liberation Organization officials ahead of the General Assembly next month. Now, the groups previously have been represented. The State Department said in a statement today, Rubio also had ordered some new visa applications from Palestinian officials be denied. Now, from what I've read, Al, this is the first time the U.S. has done this for any UN General Assembly. What is its intended effect, do you think? Sidelining, isolating Palestinian officials at the UN General Assembly. What will that achieve?
It's an interesting tactic, and you're right. This is the first time we've ever done this. As you know, and just so everybody out there, we host the headquarters for the United Nations. That's something from 1947. That's something from the post-World War II period. We volunteered.
And it was pushed by the Rockefellers. But we are a democracy, right? This is the reason why I think it should be dismantled by the Army Corps of Engineers and dumped in the Atlantic Ocean.
Host the United Nations. As part of that, anybody from any country who works at the United Nations, you know, leaders from anywhere around the world that have a reason to go to the United Nations, such as they all do during the General Assembly, that we automatically extend visas to them, even from countries we really dislike very much for a lot of reasons. We extend visas to them. Now, this is the first time we have revoked these visas. This is for a number of representatives there of the Palestinian Authority and by association, the Palestinian Liberation Organization as well. And Mahmoud Abbas, the president of the Palestinian Authority, falls into this. That was being clarified throughout the day. He will fall into this not getting a visa as well. Now, the issue is two things. Number one, Palestine. Are they a real country? Well, that's a big discussion right there. As you know, a number of countries, France, Britain, among some others, are going to actually, at the General Assembly, basically say, we recognize a Palestinian state.
Oh, yeah.
Of course, there is no actual state.
Now, remember early on in this video, I would keep on telling you that Germany, France, and England have a big problem with quantitative tightening. And they have a lot of debt. And they have to increase their taxes. And there's political instability happening in England and in France, especially in France. You have big problems with illegal immigration. And so they have to tax the citizens more and spend more, and they're not willing to cut social programs. So they're going towards what is called a doom loop. And they can't do the quantitative tightening. Because if the Federal Reserve, or not the Federal, their central bank starts to do the quantitative tightening, their yields will go up. So isn't it really interesting from this perspective to take a look at it from a global perspective, where you have England and France, especially the French, pushing for Palestine. And to continue the war. Because obviously, if Israel wiped Palestine off the map, right, and took over Gaza and took over the West Bank, we wouldn't have this problem. Or if Israel lost, and there was no Israel and it would be all Palestine, then the war would end. But they have to keep the conflict going. They have to keep the conflict going. See the point that I keep on making? It's not about Palestine. It's about quantitative tightening. It has nothing to do with Palestine. It's all about debt. And so the big decisions are being made because you had countries that kept on printing money and printing money and printing money and printing money. And now their bond markets are having a hissy fit. You have the bond vigilantes coming out and saying, hey, you have too much debt. We're going to raise the interest rates. And so it's easier for them to keep on pushing this agenda. Oh, yeah, Palestine. Yeah. Really. If they have so much time to just keep on pushing for Palestine, why aren't they fixing their own house? AKA the shithole that we call Paris.
The Palestinian state. So that was going to be a big thing. Mahmoud Abbas would, of course, have spoken at that thing. But what they're citing is that the Palestinian Authority has not condemned Hamas for October 7th.
Okay.
And that's what they're really hanging their hat on, is that they've not condemned them. And part of this is a little bit what we call lawfare, which is they're saying that the Palestinian Authority is engaged in lawfare by going to the International Court of Justice on genocide against Israel and all sorts of things. So there's a little bit of, dare I say, quid pro quo.
And that was sponsored by South Africa. Now, what's happening in South Africa? Well, there's a racial war between blacks and whites. But they also have a weakening economy. And they need money that's flowing from Iran. Oh, money flows to South Africa to do the lawfare against Israel. And Iran benefits from it because they're aligned with the Palestinians, the Palestinian cause, because they want Israel to fall. Because this is all about religion in the context of just the Middle Eastern players. It's about religion and about the Temple Mount. But then that problem about this religious war that's taking place is now a subset of a much larger problem geopolitically that's tied into big finance.
Oh, but it gets to the very charter of the United Nations and its headquarters being in New York. So this is going to play out over the coming week or weeks because this is huge.
So the State Department said the representatives assigned to the Palestinian Authority mission to the UN would be granted waivers under the U.S. host country agreement with the UN so they can continue their New York-based operations. The Palestinian ambassador to the United Nations, Riyad Mansour, telling reporters today that Mahmoud Abbas still planned to lead the delegation and was expected to address the assembly come September. Now, they're not there. These high-profile Palestinian leaders I just want to make clear to the viewers, we're not talking about Hamas officials. We're talking about Palestinian Authority officials. It's important to make the distinction. But say if Abbas is not there and others, and Canada and France and the UK and Australia and other Western nations decide to take their time in their speeches, their leaders.
I think what Trump has done is that he told Rubio, revoke the Palestinians' visas because they're not willing to push for a peace agreement. And perhaps it's also to put pressure or to push back on the Europeans with their need to have continual war in the Middle East by pushing this whole two-state solution stuff. But on the surface, probably the head of the Palestinian state or cause, or however you want to define it, probably should have had his visa to be able to participate in the UN. Maybe one or two other advisors, but not 80 people having their visas revoked. I think that was a little aggressive.
Recognize a Palestinian state, doesn't it dilute that very recognition if Abbas isn't there in the room?
I think that's very much the intent. That's exactly what the U.S. and certainly Israel are doing. And you have to remember, every day the U.S. and Israel is getting beat up in the Security Council meetings, where we're the lone votes, if you will, on a number of different things. So this has been a very painful episode for the U.S. in the United Nations because of all the international things going in what's being referred to as lawfare against Israel.
Okay. All right.
So there is
in the context of Cold War II and moving towards hot war, World War III, all right. If the Palestinians start to chip away at the land of Israel, that means that either Russia and or China starts to gain further hold in the Middle East. Well, that seems to be antithetical to the United States hegemonic power. So again, it goes back to what Kissinger had to deal with back in the 70s. There were no good options. There were only bad options. You just had to pick the least bad option. So what do? Do you let the Palestinians have land? Or do you fight and prevent a two-state solution? Because you can't have Russia and China taking control of the Middle East. What do you do? What do you do? You're the decision maker now. What do you do? Say, oh, let's just have peace. Well, no. If you have peace and you give it to the Palestinians, you have Russia and or China digging a hole in the Middle East. You know this whole Belt and Road thing, right? It's going right through Israel and right into Africa. So what do? Oh, we got to have Palestine. We got to have Palestine. We got to demonize the Jews. See, that's the problem. Those were the decision points that Kissinger had to make in 1970s. What do you do?
It's just seen as it's like, well, that's what they're going to do. This is what we're going to do. Okay. The issue here is, you're talking about denying kind of the leader of a foreign state, although it's not an actual state, despite all the things that are being said, and it won't be recognized by the Security Council as a state because of the UN, because of the U.S.
Right.
But with that said, it does set a precedent. And I'm sure there's going to be a lot of discussion, and it will be it will be a little bit strained, as you alluded to.
And you'll have a lot of YouTubers out there and on X that will demonize the lobbying group, the Israeli lobbying group. And they're not lily white. Like I said, Kissinger did bad stuff. But there was a grand strategy that was actually beneficial to the United States. Right? So you'll have these YouTubers out there, it's the lobbying group that's trying to prevent the two-state solution and blah, blah, blah. And they're not looking at the larger, bigger picture here. It's not about Israel. It's not about the Palestinians. It's about the hegemonic power of the United States. And making sure that certain regions are not heavily influenced by our, quote, enemies. Too easy to just say, it's the lobbying group. Oh, it's the Rothschilds. Oh, it's this and it's all that. Not looking at the grander strategy because they're not intelligent.
Recognize them and then look to the empty chair, so to speak, where Mahmoud Abbas would have sat and his delegation would have sat if they were actually there.
And the State Department also suspending a program that had allowed injured Palestinian children from Gaza to come to the United States for medical treatments. So no visas for that either. So we'll just have to watch this space as this war goes on. Pepper, as always, I always say thank you so much. Here.
The children don't have to be shipped to the United States. They have hospitals in the regions that they can adequately treat. In Saudi Arabia, in UAE, in Jordan, in Egypt, in Turkey, and come on.
Insight is so invaluable. It's been invaluable to me over the last 5 years. I've learned so much from you. I think our viewers know this is my last night on live now. Cheers to you now.
I just want to make this very clear. This is going to be my last interview on Live Now with you. That's it. I've put my foot down. If you call Monday and say do a live interview with me, I'm not answering the phone. That's all there is to it. So, hey, you have done an amazing job, and I have to tell you, you are a talent by what we mean in the news business, and it's been an absolute pleasure. And I'm wishing I know you're gonna have a great.
Please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com. Pay attention to the protocol that I do every day to help my health and wellness, slow down the aging process. Here's a great stack to boost up your health and wellness. Turmeric. This will bring down inflammation and soak up free radicals, help with the immune system. Ashwagandha root helps to control cortisol levels and blood glucose levels, reduces inflammation. And lignans will help with the immune system and your endocrine system, soak up free radicals and bring down inflammation. When you stack them together, the lignans, the turmeric, and the ashwagandha together, take them every day. And what will happen is you're going to help with your cardiovascular health and boost up your immune system because you're bringing down inflammation and soaking up free radicals. So please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com, get the stack, use discount 5, you get $5 off any order. Myotron, important to take if you're age 40 or older. When you start getting older, your genes will start to methylate. And when they methylate, they don't express as much, or sometimes they're turned off. This is part of the reason why you start atrophying and losing muscle, and it's harder to gain muscle. But Myotron will help with the gene expression to gain muscle and to maintain the muscle. Do resistance training and take the Myotron. This has flavonoids, polyphenols, and lignans to be able to do the gene expression to gain muscle and to maintain muscle. This is for males and females. Do some resistance training and maintain that muscle mass. Super important because there is a high correlation between loss of muscle mass in your 40s and not doing so well in your geriatric years versus people that are physically fit, cardiovascularly, and with musculature. If you're more fit, you're going to do better statistically in your geriatric years. Good night formula. This will help you to get into 3 to 5 cycles of deep sleep and REM sleep so you can consolidate memory, detoxify your central nervous system, and be well rested. Take it every day. It has tryptophan, melatonin, GABA, and passion flower. And heirloom barley. Heirloom barley helps to detoxify your body, brings down inflammation, and soaks up free radicals. You take this every day, and guess what? Your body is healthier. So please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com. Take this. Detoxify your body every day. Be amazed on how well your immune system starts to get boosted up and how well your endocrine system starts to perform when you detoxify your body every day. So please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com. And last, nattokinase. Nattokinase is fibrinolytic and helps to control your lipid profile. It helps to bring down LDL levels and increase your HDL levels. When you do that, you reduce plaque formation. So please go to my store, get the great supplements I have, use discount 5, you get $5 off any order. It's all caps, discount 5. And if you spend $100 or more, you get a free gift until supplies last. All right, so Andrew Kraft is leaving Live Now and going to do something else. I'm not sure what he's doing in replace of it, but let's go to Fox Business. It looks like they're talking about Mamdani.
New York is set to prohibit natural gas and propane inside new building and home construction in the state. This begins January 1st and runs through 2028. New York Congressman Woody is calling on
Think about that. If you're building a home in New York, you can't have natural gas in new home construction. So they're forcing you to have solar panels. I mean, portable nuclear reactors are not on the market yet for home, private home use. So so you can't have natural gas? Isn't that crazy? So you're gonna have to, so what, you have to put solar panels on, or you have to be on an electric grid? And so you have to have an electric washer and dryer. You have to have an electric stove, an oven. You have to have an electric water heater. You have to have an electric furnace. I mean, New York gets cold in the winter. Meanwhile, we have tons of natural gas. I mean, natural gas is trading at 2.7, 2.8 million British thermal units. I mean, think about this. I mean, this is crazy. So do you want to lower prices? Or do you want to increase inflation? And by doing this, it's going to increase inflation. Oh, they're trying to save the planet. Well, let me get this straight. New home builds are not going to have natural gas in New York City, according to this. You have a volcano that erupts somewhere in the world, and all of your emission savings that you're trying to do has been belched by a volcano. Was it worth it financially? Was it worth it for the climate? You can't change. This would do very, very, very little in terms of trying to prevent issues with climate. But yet you're going to be paying more. Crazy. This another liberal dumbass. Another liberal dumbass.
The hook to reverse course and allow New Yorkers a choice of their energy hookups. I want to bring in the man himself, New York Congressman Nick Langworthy. He's a member of the House Energy and Commerce Committee. Congressman, you introduced the Energy Choice Act to end blue state wars on American energy. Tell us about the bill, and also, have you gotten a response from Governor?
Well, thank you for having me, Cheryl. No, of course, I have not gotten a response from Governor Hochul, but this is a fight that is so critical to the people across New York State, especially where I'm from in Western New York.
Republican, New York congressman, not being able to get a phone call with Hochul because she's too busy putting makeup on her face like she's Cleopatra.
throughout upstate New York, we're hearing the calls for, to stop Governor Hochul's ban on safe and effective natural gas and propane. I mean, this is essentially a lifeline for our constituents. These are matters of life and death in critical winter storms where the power does go out. I mean, I lived through a blizzard in 2022 in the Buffalo region that killed 69 people. And many of them died in their own homes because they only had electric heat. Natural gas kept people alive because it was safe, it was reliable, and it didn't go down when the wire went down. This is wrong-headed. The governor slid this into the budget 3 years ago. But now, January 1st, 2026, there will be a ban on any natural gas hookup or propane hookup to new home construction. And this is something that has snuck up on.
So there's another reason why people want to leave New York. Let's say New York is not just New York City, obviously, it's New York State, right? New York City, most of the density, New York State's, the big part of its density is the 5 boroughs, right? But if you're in upstate New York, it gets cold. And you think that you're going to be just fine with just electricity. Wouldn't it be better if you have a house that can be dual electric or natural gas? That way you can keep costs down and you have a backup with the whole grid system? No, we want to just have electricity. Now, I wouldn't be surprised that this is a push towards nuclear. Because think about it. If you have a natural gas, you don't need more nuclear power. But if you switch to the electric grid, then you need more nuclear power. But you can also have central power stations that are running on natural gas. But a lot of them are on coal, natural gas, or your nuclear, right? But if it's more of an electric grid, this is a push for more nuclear power. So I would be surprised. I would be interested to know the lobbying group and who was pushing this. Because there is a case to be made that if the electricity that's being generated is from natural gas or not. Because if it is, then it's a wash in terms of climate. But if it's not, are you generating that electricity through coal burning? Are you generating that electricity through nuclear? So maybe this is a play for nuclear lobbying group.
Well, she's certainly not out there campaigning on it and bringing awareness to it, but the entire housing industry in New York State, and I've talked to the bill.
I can't stand when the audio breaks. Come on. Technical difficulties there. Well, this is booting up a little bit.
You want to build an app and have no idea how to code or where to start? Check out Base44. I built this daily habit tracker that helps users log small wins, track their mood, reflect on patterns.
Set to prohibit natural gas and propane inside new building and home construction in the state. This begins January 1st and runs through 2028. New York Congressman Nick Langworthy is calling on Governor Kathy Hochul to reverse course and allow New Yorkers a choice. The bill admin right now. I mean, I know you're going back to work next week.
Absolutely. The bill is in my Energy and Commerce Committee, and I have assurances from committee that we'll be marking that bill up in September. We have a companion bill with U.S. Senator Jim Justice, and he's carrying that with Senator Shelley Moore Capito from West Virginia as well. And, we're in a race to get this on President Trump's desk by the end of the year so we can beat the clock and stop Hochul's natural gas ban.
I've got Todd Pyro, my Fox News colleague, on set. He's got a question.
John, it's great to chat with you. I'd like to ask a journalistic question, but I don't have one for you. I have the complaints of an angry Northeasterner who saw his bill yesterday. It came in the mail. I'm in Connecticut, and I'm like, come on, guys, I can't yell at my kids and my wife any longer to turn off lights. I mean, we've turned off everything. So going forward, will my electric bill, maybe not next year, but in the intervening 5 years, indexed for inflation, go down? Or is this just a race to the bottom?
It's going to go. No, it's going to go up. It's going to the energy costs are going to go up. Going to go up.
From what we've seen, Governor Hochul's Public Service Commission has just greenlit several rate increases. There are more on the way because they are forcing expenditure by the public utilities in beefing up the grid to get ready for this full electrification mandate that they passed into law several years ago. I mean, we're talking about, in excess of $64 million that they have insisted will be coming from future ratepayer increases. Part of the tale that isn't told with this electrification mandate on housing is your electric bill in cold winter months can be in excess of $1,000 if you're fully heating the home with electricity. This isn't affordable. No one asked for this. I mean, this was to satisfy radical climate activists in her primary electorate. And that's why they did it in the dead of night, tucked it into the budget, and never had a hearing or a discussion about it.
Unbelievable. And she's my governor, to be clear here as well, sir. I have any.
That woman is crazy. The governor of New York literally is a nutcase. Please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com, and get the Boomer Boost. Boomer Boost will focus on a multitude of different systems. It'll focus on your heart and your vascular system, help with your brain function, bring up energy levels, boost up metabolism, and help with musculature. So please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com, and get the Boomer Boost and take it every day. Collagen, dual purpose. It's going to help with your skin, your nails, your hair, help with your joints and your cartilage, help with musculature and bone density. Take it every day. It's a powder. Mix it with soft foods, filtered water, smoothie. Now, Gladiator Barley is a supplement that you can take separately or take it with the Boomer Boost. But this will help to build muscle. It stacks well with the Myotrol and bring down inflammation, soak up free radicals, and detoxify your body. This is more powerful than the heirloom barley. Some people prefer to take the heirloom barley because they're not focused on gaining muscle. But if you want to gain muscle and you want to detoxify your body, bring down inflammation, and soak up free radicals, this is a great supplement to take. It stacks really well with Myotrol and Boomer Boost. And when you stack it with Boomer Boost and Myotrol and you do that resistance training, you're getting the max benefits to being able to control your A1C levels. Now, that's a big problem in the United States because many people in the United States are either borderline diabetic or diabetic. But if you start to improve your health by taking the proper supplementation and changing your lifestyle, you can reverse it in most cases. But sometimes you wait too long and you've passed the tipping point and you can't reverse it. So please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com, and get the Gladiator Barley. Very high quality. It's a protein powder, but this isn't like your regular day protein powder. This is special. So please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com. Very powerful stuff. Take it every day. I use it every day. And get the cleanse or max 35. This will boost up your immune system. You take a teaspoon a day, gargle, swish it in your mouth, 20, 30 seconds, and swallow it. It'll help the epithelial lining in your oral cavity and your oral pharynx. It'll help with your mucosal barrier, and it'll help to boost up your immune system. So go to my store, get the Cleanse or the Max 35, take a teaspoon a day every day. If you're not feeling well or someone around you is not feeling well, take a tablespoon or 2 a day until everything's all clear, and then go back to your maintenance dose. Be prepared for the fall. You're gonna need it. I don't know why.
Let Elisa Boddick know. We want to talk to her soon. I do want to move on to some other things with you. President Trump signing an executive order this week. It would eliminate cashless bail for suspects that are arrested in Washington, and a separate order to end the policy. That would be nationwide. You want Governor Hochul to do the same for New York.
Coming to the stage this Friday, it's Ed's first team karaoke night. But he's wondering, why might thinking red black psoriasis take center stage? Stop. You have that.
Explain.
Yeah, absolutely. Cashless bail, you know, I was the state Republican Party chairman when cashless bail took effect under, you know, the previous governor's administration. It was a disaster right off the bat. I mean, we literally had people that would rob a bank in the morning, get let out an hour later and rob a second bank. It was instantaneous because criminals knew there were no consequences anymore. There was no longer a reason to pull back from their criminal activity because they didn't have to worry about spending the night in jail. I've met with every law enforcement agency in my district, in all of them, yesterday. You know, in a small village in the southern tier, they're telling me that their biggest problem is cashless bail. The fact that the criminals know there's really not a damn thing that the cops can do to them, and they'll just be right back in there getting their appearance tickets, and it'll take 4 or 5 years for this to catch up with a criminal, and they can move on to another jurisdiction before that gets to that point. This has been a ridiculous failure for the people of the state of New York. Kathy Hochul refuses to do anything that would be common sense, that would help make our streets safer. I really applaud President Trump in what he's done here in Washington, D.C.
Sorry to interrupt you, but it's been horrific for New York City in particular. It's something that has destroyed the city since the pandemic. I want to get your take on the city real quick before you go. There's this new poll that shows Andrew Cuomo beating Zohar Mamdani in a head-to-head match in the mayoral race. Cuomo bests Mamdani 52 to 41% if everybody else drops out, Congressman. I want to get your reaction.
All right. There's no way that the Republican, I think it's Silvio and Adams, is going to step aside. There's no way. They're going to take this all the way to the end. And because of that, they split the ticket. Just like what happened with Ross Perot, Clinton, and George Bush. And George Bush lost because of Ross Perot. Clinton was an accidental candidate. And what's going to happen with Mamdani is that he's going to be an accidental candidate because the other mayoral candidates will not concede and focus the voter concentration to fight socialism. So socialism is going to come to the United States in New York City by accident because of hubris. Thank you very much. Shit.
I mean, listen, this is about saving the city and saving the state.
Right.
You know, I never thought I'd be, you know, someone in public life that would say Cuomo is the best option, but whoever can beat Mamdani is the best option. And that is what is critically.
This goes back to what I was saying with the whole Kissinger thing. Sometimes you're in a situation where there is no good solution. You just have to pick the least bad solution. And in this case, the least bad solution is Cuomo. I hate Cuomo. I want Adams to win. But Adams has a lot of corruption and has been tainted and is hurting in the polls. I don't think he can make it. But it doesn't make any sense to throw the vote out to Adams. I'm going to have to vote for Cuomo, even though I hate Cuomo. So it goes back to what was going on with Kissinger. Kissinger had to make bad decisions, but they were the least bad. But the ones that want to demonize Kissinger only focus, well, that's what he did. Yeah, but they don't focus on what were the other bad solutions. And remember what the grand strategy was: prevent a nuclear war. Well, now we got to prevent socialism in New York. So we got to vote in Cuomo. Then he's going to reboot his political career and run for office for 2028 for the presidential election. I mean, this is just literally, this is like living in a comic book.
You have literally a communist trying to run the most important city in the world. The gravity of this situation is drastic, and people need to put egos aside and really do a calculated decision here. This isn't time for a vanity run. This isn't time to just set yourself up for something down the road. The balance of the greatest city in the world is hanging in the balance, and I think people really have to do a gut check as to where is their heart? Do they care about their community and their city, or do they care about their own political hide?
America's being tested right now. Are we going to go down the hellhole road of democratic socialism and this whole Fabian society horseshit? Please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com, and fight democratic socialism. All right? Go to my store and get the C60. It's a very potent antioxidant. You can get it in avocado oil, extra virgin olive oil, and MCT coconut oil. C60 is a 60 carbon molecule that has to be suspended in an oil. Take a teaspoon a day, preferably on an empty stomach, for best absorption, and it's going to soak up free radicals, help with the health of your mitochondria. Your energy levels are going to go up. It'll soak up free radicals at the vascular level, so it reduces plaque formation. It'll help with your immune system and your endocrine system and even your neurons. And when you have healthy neurons, you have better neuroplasticity and you think faster and your memory is better. So please go to my store and get the C60. Take a teaspoon a day, every day. I've been taking this since 2016. And you'll also notice other benefits like better eyesight. So please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com. Take the C60. It's part of my anti-aging protocol. It's a very potent antioxidant. All right. And get the lozenges. So we're going into the fall and the winter season. You're going to need these. So get the elderberry zinc lozenges. You get it in a 21 count, get a few bags for your household, or get the drops, which are a little bit smaller than the lozenges, in 100 count. You can get it in honey and lemon, in cherry, and also in blueberry. Get a few bags for your household. Be prepared for razor throat in the fall and in the winter. It's coming. Trust me. Trust me. All right. Let's take a look at another video here. I want to play this video by Fox Business talking about companies cracking down on office activism.
Under the workforce, of the workplace, I should say, the employer has taken back a lot of power over the employee. Or, as the Wall Street Journal puts it, the boss has had it with all the office activists. The journal is referring specifically to Microsoft and its fast action to deal with anti-Israel activists. They had occupied a top executive office, shutting it down. Well, we can't do that these days. Several people were fired. Microsoft put the foot down. Microsoft's not alone. Alphabet, Tesla, JP Morgan Chase, they've recently clamped down on political activism that affects the functioning of the company. Not that long ago, employers were bending over backwards to accommodate their employees. But times change. For a start, the job market has tightened, especially for lower-level tech workers. AI is taking their jobs, and the tech companies that are spending big money on AI, they've been forced to cut costs. Your job is not secure, so don't rock the boat. And watch out, Donald Trump is in the Oval Office, and he does not take kindly to anything woke. Your boss has to please the president, not annoy him by pandering to activists. So get back to work in the office. A lot of work from homers have been ordered back, And by the way, knock off the internal political discussions. Google's Sundar Pichai says this is not a business. This is a business, not the place for political debate. The journal goes back to Jason Fried. Remember him? He's the CEO of 37 Signals. Back in 2021, he issued a memo telling his staff to limit societal and political discussions at work. There was uproar at that. Some employees quit. Fried actually had to apologize. 4 years later, Fried says, it's just all gone now. We're just focused on the work. It's over, folks. Love it or hate it, the boss is back. Sakandara Vani just getting started.
Please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com. Get the zeolite. This will remove heavy metals, toxins, and chemicals from your body. Zeolite will bind to them and allow you to urinate them out within 6 to 8 hours. Take this every day. Take 3 small drops underneath your tongue and drink filtered water. Super important to detoxify your body every day. I also have very high quality deodorants for males and females. You can get it in citrus or in peppermint, lavender, and tea tree. These are dual purpose deodorants. You use it as a daily deodorant, but it will also help to detoxify your body. Have you noticed a theme here? It's important to detoxify your body. This is made from essential oils from the Himalayas, has no aluminum and no baking soda, made from all natural ingredients, very high quality. Please go to my store and get those deodorants. D3 and K2, you stack them together and you do some resistance training, take in calcium, guess what? You build denser bone. Also, D3 and K2 taken together will help with your cardiovascular health. So it's a dual purpose stack. Structural nanosilver toothpaste helps to whiten your teeth, freshen your breath, help with the health of your gum line and reduce inflammation. Super important to have good oral hygiene. There are many people that are having poor oral hygiene and they're increasing the risks of vascular problems and valvular problems. You don't want that, especially when you get in your geriatric years. So you need to have a good oral hygiene. There's no toothpaste better than this. Get a few tubes of this toothpaste from my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com. The link is in the description of this video and all my videos. And lastly, the gel. You can get it in a tube form or in a quick dispenser. Have some at work, have some at home. You never know when you need it. It's dual purpose. You can use it as a daily skincare. If you have a cut, an abrasion, or a minor burn, put it on there and it'll help to heal it. It'll heal it quicker. How? How does it work? It keeps it clean. When you keep the wounds clean and moist, guess what? It heals quicker. Now, this can also be used as an aftershave. And if you're not feeling well or someone around you is not feeling well during that fall season or winter season, guess what? Put it on your hands, around your mouth, around your eyes, around your ears, around your nose, lightly coat your nostrils. It stays active for 5.5 hours. Way better than Perel. Perel evaporates within 60 seconds and it cracks your skin. This gel heals your skin and stays active for 5.5 hours. So which one is better for you? Please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com. Use discount 5, you get $5 off any order. You spend $100 or more, you get a free gift until supplies last. Thank you for listening. That's the end of the show, but pay attention to the bigger picture. I think the big theme of this show today was that we may have predispositions of people like Kissinger, but if we actually step aside and look at the bigger picture and check our biases at the door, we have a tendency to be able to understand why certain people made a decision at certain moments in time. And when you are open-minded, you start to realize that bad decisions may have been made, but the option set for the other options may have been worse. And that there is a larger geopolitical strategy that's taking place that is much bigger than the subsets of these conflicts like Ukraine or what's going on in the Middle East. There's a bigger strategy. Now, because Kissinger is gone, I'm afraid that there's no Kissinger around to prevent a nuclear war. So please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com, and get the great supplements I have. And learn about what has transpired in the last 50 years, or maybe even a larger arc, if you're interested in history. But we are in a place now because of the decisions that were made, not just last week or 3 years ago or 5 years ago or 10 years ago, but decisions that were made going all the way before World War I. So please go to my store and help support the work that I do. Thank you for listening. Have a nice day.